الصبر سلاحي واخر صبر الموت، والكل شايف بس لا مش فارق، صوتي حياة وانا واقف وحدي، العالم ضدي وانا مخشى، سلبوني روحي، افتح البيت في قلبي وانا راجع وبايدي ولدي، ولو كل العالم كان ضدي انا راجع يا بلادي راجع.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to all our viewers. Welcome to wherever you're joining us from, South Africa, you're joining us from Europe, you're joining us from the Middle East, North America, you're joining us from wherever you are. A warm welcome on behalf of Social Intifada. I am your host, Khalid Vawda, and my co-host tonight, Maulana Ibrahim Moosa. Evergreen and coming off, alhamdulillah, a busy week doing work for Masjid Al-Aqsa and for Palestine. He's back from his travels, alhamdulillah, in time for our live stream on behalf of Palestine Information Network. Welcome, Maulana Ibrahim.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings to everybody joining us this evening, and looking forward to a very fruitful event, inshallah, that's connecting all the continents, great expertise, inshallah, for the next 2.5 hours.
As promised, and as the lineup has been, and you've seen the adverts going out on all social media streams, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, various networks, on YouTube as well. Mashallah, we've got all of our speakers have responded almost immediately to the invitation to be able to come on board and assist with advice and expertise around this important topic and this theme that we've outlined for you this evening. It's 8 o'clock Johannesburg time, wherever you're joining us from. So our topic, our theme for the live stream is from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond. The reason we've connected the three, we've all seen the genocide that's been unfolding in Gaza for the last 1.5 years. And despite all odds, the small pocket and piece of land and this amazingly resilient population in Gaza has taught the world a lesson in steadfastness, in sumud, in resistance. And they've stood firm against literally all of the Western governments together, combined military might, intelligence, weapons, finance, haspara, propaganda, you name it, they've stood against it. Alhamdulillah, there's a ceasefire, it's a small celebration, and some of our guests will be talking about that, will be enlightening us on that. From Gaza, we need to link into Masjid Al-Aqsa because this is the epicenter. October the 7th happened because, and the operation was named Tufan Al-Aqsa. So we want to understand what's the link between Palestinians, between the land, between Masjid Al-Aqsa, and where do we go from here? What lies beyond, especially with changes we're seeing taking place in the region as well. Maulana Ibrahim, it's also the Al-Aqsa Week commemoration. Would you like to enlighten our viewers a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an event that our event this evening, we're plugging into that theme as well. We're trying to make sure that we reflect the flavor of Al-Aqsa Week during this event. Al-Aqsa Week is an event that has occurred since 2017, and traditionally in the month of Rajab, we would find that people do speak about Al-Aqsa a lot more. The month of Rajab is also the occasion when Salahuddin al-Ayyubi liberated Masjid Al-Aqsa as per the historical record. And therefore, Friends of Al-Aqsa in the UK were the first to start off with this idea under a broad umbrella, just get people active, whether it's schools, whether it's universities, whether it's social media, talk about Al-Aqsa for this entire week. And year to year, we've just seen a growth.
Looks like
intending that is created by this week. But I think we come to what is occurring right now in Masjid Al-Aqsa. We have to, as you've mentioned, link it to what is happening in Gaza. And I think the whole symmetry or the whole progress or the link between the topic that has been advertised from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond. Number one is Al-Aqsa is the nucleus and the icon of the Palestinian struggle. Number two, it was the grave desecrations at Al-Aqsa, which was a stimulus for Tufan Al-Aqsa. And then for the people in Gaza who sacrificed so much, Al-Aqsa was part of their foundational discourse. And thereafter, the soldiers, the genocidal soldiers who participated, saw firsthand the love that people of Palestine had, people of Gaza had for Masjid al-Aqsa. And now that we've reached a ceasefire or temporary pause in this particular genocide, we have to look forward to say, Gaza may be to some extent resolved, but what about the bigger issue, the unresolved issue of Al-Aqsa and the Zionist project there? And once we get to Al-Aqsa, Al-Aqsa represents heritage and civilization. And what can Al-Aqsa offer to humankind once it is free and liberated?
Alhamdulillah. And we hope that the viewers can draw lots of benefit from the amazing lineup of speakers that we've got. The first of whom is waiting and ready to come on board. Inshallah, Maulana Ibrahim will do the introduction, but I just want to go through some of the other speakers that you can expect to hear from this evening, inshallah. In no particular order, Dr. Azzam Tamimi from the UK, Brother Mansour Shouman, Dr. Khalid, who's waiting, Sister Youmna El Sayed, Zarefah Baroud, Dr. Uthman Lateef. Unfortunately, Dr. Anas Al-Tikriti, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, he had a janaza in the family which he had to attend to, which required his travel, so he can't make it tonight. And apologies from our sister Ramia, Abdo Sultan from Sydney. Our times got mixed up, unfortunately, with Australia being Monday morning, South Africa being Sunday evening. So inshallah, we'll hear from her next time. We do have as well Sheikh Irshaad Sedick from South Africa. We've got Maulana Abdul Khaliq Allie, the president of the United Ulama Council of South Africa. Coming in from the US, we've got our sister Shireen Falasteen. We've got our brother Moath Hamzeh. We've got brother Nasir Qadri, and we've got brother Mazhar Khan as well. So there's a broad variety of lineup with lots of expertise, inshallah. But I'm going to pass over to Maulana Ibrahim and our first guest. Remember your comments, your questions. Please feel free to share those on the YouTube channel. We'll try and have a look at those, and we'll try and pop those up on screen as we go along.
So it's our great pleasure this evening is also in the United Kingdom at the moment for a number of Aqsa Week programs, none other than Dr. Khalid El Awaisi. He is the Executive Director of the Islamic Jerusalem Research Academy based in Turkey, whose main speciality is the historical geography of Beit al-Maqdis and the geographical interpretations of the Quran. Dr. Khalid has traveled widely across the world. And as we welcome you to this special online forum this evening, Doctor, I take us to the 2002 documentary that was produced by John Pilger. And just to sponge off that name, John Pilger had said Palestine is still the issue. And I would like you to perhaps talk to the topic this evening at the start of this forum, at the start of Aqsa Week, that Al-Aqsa is and will always be the issue. How do we connect developments in Gaza, the ceasefire, whatever it may be in Gaza, with the role of Al-Aqsa now as well as in the future? Over to you, Doctor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. First of all, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and for this excellent initiative. And I think you already, and together with your of October for Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, but this has been centered around Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa right from the beginning of the British occupation in 1917. The first revolt was connected to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa with Nabi Moosa. Then the second revolt was related to Al-Buraq wall, and it was Al-Buraq revolt. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa was always present within the resistance against this first the British occupation, then the Zionist occupation. And Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa continues to be the source of inspiration, because this matter is not a Palestinian issue. This matter goes beyond that. This is a matter that is connected to every single Muslim, to every single, today we see this going beyond even the Muslims, to humanity. And Al-Aqsa is at the heart of this. And to link it with where we are going today, there are two or three points that I would like to mention. One is the Zionist soldiers going through Al-Masjid, going through Gaza. They were shocked at the way the people of Gaza were connected to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And you have seen many of the images where the Zionist soldiers are destroying images of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa in every house that they enter into Gaza. And they are drawing pictures of what they call a temple that they would like to build on the site of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. The Tufan of Al-Aqsa, the flood of Al-Aqsa, was started for the protection of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and for the Ummah to take on the responsibility. The people of Gaza have paid a very dear price. They have paid a very dear price, and they were willing that every single person in Gaza were turning for their turn to be martyrs, on the point that they would like the Ummah to wake up, and for this Ummah to take its responsibility. The people of Gaza have done more than they are capable of for the protection of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Now the turn is on this Ummah to take up its responsibility. The coming month of Ramadan is going to be a very dangerous and one of the most dangerous months of Ramadan for this Ummah. Now we see the Zionists turning away from Gaza, being forced to turn away from Gaza into, now they're trying to score points in the West Bank. And with the coming month of Ramadan, they would want to score points over Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. And with the current American president, there is a massive danger, because the last time he was in office, he issued the deal of the century. And on the deal of the century, one of the main points was that Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa will be an open place for worship for all faiths. And what he means here, particularly the Jewish Zionist extremists, to be able to pray in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And what they would like to implement is what has been practiced in the Masjid of Ibrahim alayhi salam in Al-Khalil. And this is a very dangerous time for Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And if the Ummah does not take its responsibility, Allah forbids, it is a time that we can lose Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. So it is a time for this Ummah to take on its responsibility, not leave Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa alone during this month of coming month of Ramadan. And events like this, raising awareness on Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is in the heart of every person in Gaza. You saw the woman throwing flour at the fighters and the resistance fighter in Gaza yesterday and saying, "Birruh biddam naftika ya Aqsa," with our souls, with our blood, we sacrifice all of it for Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. A 12-year-old girl coming out of the rubble from underneath one of the buildings in Gaza, saying with her words, "Had I not become a shaheed, had I been a shaheed, it would have been worth it for Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa." People who've lost their property, they've lost everything. They know the meaning of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, because Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is not just the past or the present. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is the future of this Ummah. And without Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, we will not be able to achieve the rising of this Ummah once again.
Dr. Khalid, I would like to thank you profusely for joining us on this particular live stream. Since we do have perhaps 2 or 3 minutes still with you, I'd just ask you a follow-up question in terms of this week ahead. How do we, if it's called Global Beit al-Maqdis Week or Global Al-Aqsa Week, what are some very specific activities that we could use in this week as a springboard for perhaps Ramadan and bigger campaigns to come?
Yes, I think, thank you very much, Maulana Ibrahim, for this question. I think there is a lot on this Ummah, a lot that can be done during this time. Remembering that the night journey came at a time, the most difficult time in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it changed the perception for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we are at a very difficult time in the life of this ummah. 2 billion Muslims are unable to pass on a glass of water into Gaza without the permission of the Zionists. Let us break these chains. Let us break the siege on Gaza. Let us break the siege on Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And this, first and foremost, a lot has to be done on the education and the education of the ummah on the importance of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. The biggest problem this ummah has is Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa has been not on our agenda. Al-Aqsa has to be back on our agenda. And I would like to suggest very quickly within the next minute 5 action points that every Muslim needs to take on a daily basis towards the liberation of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa at an individual level, at other levels. I'm sure other speakers will talk about it. One is make a dua that Allah grants us a prayer in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa free from occupation on a daily basis after every salah. 2, learn more about the importance of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and what it means to us as a Muslim. And I would like to suggest a website that everyone can go into, www.ilovealaqsa.com, which does this in 9 different languages for the Muslim Ummah, and people can register into it and follow the information to learn more. 3, follow the news that is happening in Bayt al-Maqdis, and these people are doing it on your behalf. They're defending Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa on your behalf. So at least follow their news and share this news with people so that they are aware of what is happening. And make sure that this is a very important point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Isra verse 7 says, before we will enter al-masjid, we have to disgrace their faces. And they make your life easy to disgrace. Do not support the Zionists, and the boycott campaign has been very successful over this since the start of the genocide. Continue this. Number 5, send your gift to Al-Aqsa, as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told Maymuna radiyallahu anha, prepare your gift. Send your gift, you will get the reward as if you have prayed in it. These 5 action points should be done on a daily basis by every Muslim. This will reconnect the hearts, minds, and the souls of every Muslim with Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. And this is a responsibility for every one of us. We need to take action. Let us see the liberation of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa in our lifetime. Let us pray the Salatul Fath in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa before time goes past. Let us be amongst those who will stand in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and celebrate its liberation soon, inshallah azza wa jal.
Inshallah, Dr. Khalid El Awaisi, Executive Director of the Islamic Jerusalem Research Academy, joining us from the United Kingdom this evening, opening up our From Gaza to Al-Aqsa and Beyond online seminar this evening. Shukran for your time and all the best for the programs and the activities that lay ahead. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
MashaAllah, those action points, I'm sure we'll recap on those in the coming minutes in the evening, inshallah. But I see our next guest is already online. MashaAllah, I'm going to just get him on, and I want to introduce our dear brother, Jazakallah Khair, who is joining us while he's traveling, MashaAllah, both Dr. Khalid and our dear brother Mansour Shouman, who is now on our virtual stage, MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum, brother Mansour, how are you?
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much for having me here.
Jazakallah khair for making the time. For our viewers, our dear brother Mansour has been so active, being Palestinian by birth, being in Gaza when the genocide broke out. He became a citizen journalist. He's a survivor of the genocide. He's Palestinian Canadian. He was reporting on Gaza. And while he was documenting the genocide, he had massive risk to his own life. Alhamdulillah, he's well and he's okay. And since he's left Gaza, he's been doing work non-stop, mashallah. May Allah reward you for all the work you've been doing, traveling all over the world, charitable work, reporting on Gaza. His social media channels are very, very active, mashallah. Brother Mansour, Jazakallah khair for joining us, and Jazakallah khair for joining the stream and the viewers. On behalf of Social Intifada and Palestine Information Network, we'd like to welcome you. I've got a question for you that I think, inshallah, we can just get you started on. We've heard obviously that the start of Gaza of October the 7th was Tufan al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa flood. Now, as Dr. Khalid just touched on a short while ago, the people of Gaza paid for this. They paid a dear, dear price for this, with the number of shuhada that we've had in Gaza. What do you think is the responsibility of the Muslims around the world to these defenders of Masjid al-Aqsa? What is our responsibility, those of us who are not in occupied Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Al-Quds, even people not being Palestinian by ethnicity or birth? What is our role and responsibility in this regard?
Okay, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much for having me here. MashaAllah, the Social Intifada is doing an amazing job. Please continue doing what you're doing. Wallahi, we're so proud of you. I'm talking to you live from Bangladesh. It's almost 20 past midnight here. Despite being thousands of kilometers away from Palestine, and despite themselves being refugees and have gone through massacre and ethnic cleansing, mashallah, I've spent the last couple of days here in with our Rohingya brothers and sisters, and everyone here talks about Palestine and Gaza and Al-Aqsa as if it's their own cause. I even met young children that were that were wearing shirts talking about the importance of supporting Palestine and standing up for Al-Aqsa. So, subhanallah, to answer your question, Al-Aqsa doesn't really need you and I. Wallahi, we are the ones that need Al-Aqsa. We're the ones that need Palestine. If at one point we think that without us being there, Al-Aqsa will and the role of Al-Aqsa in the hearts of free people all around the world will fall short, then we are mistaken. This is a holy land. This is a land that has been a source of positive change before you and I ever existed. Al-Aqsa and Palestine was the birthplace of many of the prophets that tried to save the people of this world in this life and the hereafter. It has been a changing point in history throughout Islam. Look at the Battle of Hittin that ended the Mughals. Look at the that ended the Crusades and restored Jerusalem. Look at the Battle of Ain Jalut that ended the Mughals. Look at the Battle of Akka that ended the French. Look at the Battle of Yarmouk that ended Herakl and the Byzantine Empire. So right now, Gaza is ending Zionism. This is what we are witnessing now. We are now witnessing history together. And the question that we need to answer is, what is my role? What is your role during these events? Will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala consider to use me and you during these historical events, during these events that are changing the course of history and the political, geographical, economical, even social mentality of the world? So Al-Aqsa is greater than everything else. Wallahi, Al-Aqsa and the cause of Al-Aqsa is greater than any other cause that we think we have in the back of our mind. And when the brothers from Gaza, they could have said, this is a Gaza revolution, or this is a defense for Gaza, or this is something for Palestine, but they called it Al-Aqsa flood, right? Because one of the goals of Al-Aqsa flood was to stop at that time the normalization of Jerusalem being the capital of Israel. the normalization in the media of Al-Aqsa being taken over. We all remember the story of the red cows and how they were brought to Jerusalem so that they can start the process of bringing Al-Aqsa and turning it into their supposed King David temple, right? So with what happened on October the 7th, alhamdulillah, it has brought Al-Aqsa back to the forefront, not only of Palestinians or Arabs or Muslims, it has brought it to the forefront of all the world, leaders and civilians. So whether I like it or you like it, Al-Aqsa will continue to make the headlines. Even with something as simple as releasing the prisoners. Look at how our brothers and sisters are using very innovative ways of marketing. We don't have to be on the ground in Gaza to stand up for Al-Aqsa, right? Believe it or not everyone in Gaza is an angel. During my time there, I've seen people in Gaza who sold their religion and their land for a cigarette. Okay? I've seen people there who, when the Zionists were entering different areas in Gaza, the Zionists on their loudspeakers will call onto the robbers that they had already agreed on to go inside different neighborhoods and tell them, go and steal these areas and come back to us and tell us if you see any freedom fighters fighting in these areas waiting for us. We've all seen and heard about the absurd prices of different commodities inside Gaza during the ongoing genocide. A lot of these businessmen have to now be held accountable because they are the true allies of the occupation in increasing the level of hardship on the Palestinian people on the ground. So each one of us knows what their strength is, knows what their opportunity areas are. And time is very limited right now. Right now, every day, weeks and months change. Time is moving very, very fast. And if we are not able to catch up and are not able to be as big as what is happening in Al-Aqsa is, then we will miss the boat. And Allah may choose someone else to use during these times. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make clear a path for you, to use you in your strength in the best way possible. Maybe you will not see the light of what you need to do right now, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preparing you for that day. Believe me, here in Bangladesh, I've seen the future leaders of the Muslim world. People who are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing now through hardship, through hunger, through economical starvation. And I can see in their eyes, and I can see in their mentality, I can see in their innovation that yes, right now they are going through these difficult times, but one day these will be our rulers, inshallah, once we try to re-establish proper Islamic political systems, not only in this region, but in the whole world. My dear brothers and sisters, the whole world is currently being ruled unjustly through man-made laws that have proven to cause extreme political, economical, family-ruining methodologies on all of us. Look at the riba institutions ravaging our lifestyle. Look at how families have broken down, marriage has broken down. Supposed gender stuff has been spread throughout everywhere. Look at how supposed democratic countries and who is truly ruling the countries there. What is happening in Palestine now is a lantern of change for the whole world. And we know that as per the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith, ثُمَّ تَكُونُ خِلَافَةٌ عَلَى مِنْهَاجِ النُّبُوَّةِ, and that the khilafah, the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to rule justly for the whole world, will restart once more from the land of Jerusalem, from Al-Aqsa. Where will you be during these times? Where will I be? How will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use us? It is the honor of our life to be selected for such a cause. Jazakumullah khair wa barakallah feekum.
Jazakallah khair. Brother Mansour, before you go, there's an important question from our viewers. I'll pop it up on screen. Our sister Kate Jennings is asking, and one of the other viewers has also asked, what is the role of non-Muslims in the cause of Al-Aqsa?
Sure. Okay. I think when we listen to our brothers in the resistance, they send the message out to Palestinians, to Arabs, to Muslims, and then they say ila ahrar al-alam, the free people of this world. So any message that applies to Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims also applies to the free world, to people who are seeing the demonic action of Zionism, not only in Palestine, but in their own countries. We need them to be accelerating with us the change that is intended for all of us. I also advise our fellow non-Muslims to take the opportunity now to learn more about what is keeping Palestinian people on the ground strong and steadfast. It is one word: faith. Hence, I think it is a good opportunity to take the time to learn more about Islam, because we love you and we want what is best for you in this life and this hereafter. Hence, we invite you to learn more about the Quran, about the life of the Prophet ﷺ and his teaching. And if you have an opportunity, talk to your Muslim friends and visit your local masjid.
I hope that answers your question, Kate Jennings, and I think Van Gie Hatton as well had the same question. Brother Mansour, you've been live streaming to us. You've taken the time out. It's past midnight, the early hours of the morning in Bangladesh. On behalf of the viewers, on behalf of everybody from us here in South Africa and globally, we ask Allah to strengthen you and preserve you in the good work that you're doing. And we hope to, inshallah, speak soon. Jazakallah khair for the excellent work.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. I think that just highlights the dedication of those who are working for Palestine. Mansour is traveling. Our first guest spoke to us from his car while he's traveling through, I think it was in England as well, and he's not from England. So this is how important the cause is to the carriers of the cause. I think while we're just waiting for our next guest, I just want to elaborate on a point that Mansour touched on, Maulana Ebrahim, and I think you've probably picked up on that. Two important things there. Gaza is ending Zionism. I think that's very telling. That statement is very, very telling. Gaza is ending Zionism. And secondly, Al-Aqsa is greater than anything else. Al-Aqsa is greater than anything else. We'll come back. We'll touch on those in a short while. I see our next guest is available. Maulana Ibrahim, over to you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. Once again, a big shout out to all our viewers joining us all over the world on the social intifada platforms, on the Palestine Information First Qibla platforms. And we do understand there are listeners joining us on Radio Islam this evening as well. It's our great pleasure to welcome Maulana Abdul Khaliq Allie. He's in the middle of delivering a lesson, delivering a community program out in Cape Town. He is the President of the United Ulama Council of South Africa. We welcome you to this live online platform. Maulana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Shukran, Maulana. I would understand that perhaps you possibly addressing us and your live audience as well. We handing it over to you. You are somebody who always tries to awaken the audiences that you speak to. You were in Makkah recently, Umrah, and at every juncture you would make a dua. You would try to connect that situation to Masjid al-Aqsa. The slogan Al-Aqsa fi Khatar, it raises itself time and time again. It's been raising itself for at least the past 20 to 30 years. But if we were to say Al-Aqsa fi Khatar today in January 2025, could you spell out for us over the next few minutes how is Al-Aqsa in danger and how should we respond to these intensifying threats?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all the viewers and to those who have tuned into this international broadcast here from South Africa. Let me compliment our team here for putting this wonderful program together, and may Allah bless and reward, inshallah Aziz, from the shores of the Cape through Africa and globally. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all the liberators of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak, and that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give freedom to the Palestinian people. It is very unique that this week, Al-Aqsa week, alhamdulillah, is a week that we see the statements from Trump on the one hand, and on the other hand, we see the great determined leadership from Hamas, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, showcasing the dignity for the people of Gaza and the Palestinian people and for the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I felt extremely proud yesterday when I attended a nikah, and I was looking at the scenes as it was coming through, alhamdulillah, and it gave us great hope, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on the side of truth, always on the side of justice, always on the side of the oppressed, and we must have conviction in that. And yes, Al-Aqsa fi Khatar is a slogan that has been raised by none other than the great mujahid and great leader, none other than Sheikh Ra'id Salah. Sheikh Ra'id Salah brought the message about approximately 20 years ago. He brought this message to us to say, Al-Aqsa fi Khatar, Al-Aqsa fi Khatar, Al-Aqsa is in danger. And at that particular time, obviously the excavations had taken place underneath, and it continues to take place. And Sheikh Ra'id Salah, Hafadahullah wa Ra'ah, with the Islamic movement and the brothers around Al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak, they raised, alhamdulillah, the global awareness around Al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak to say that we all have a duty and a responsibility to preserve and to protect Al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak. Now, our theme here this evening is from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond. And what are the threats that Al-Aqsa al-Mubarak is faced today? I was reading and I saw that in the year 2024, that is last year, can you imagine the amount of extremist settlers that stormed Al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak? There's recorded approximately 59,584 incursions that has taken place in Al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak. Meaning these Zionists, in an organized way, allowed by the apartheid government of Israel, giving a platform to these extremists to say, you have the right to enter into Al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak. 59,584 recorded incursions has taken place. And what added to that is the Talmudic rituals that they've started performing there. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. But there is something that we should also highlight here, and that is that the Zionist Israeli state, they have this policy that is known as the Judaization policy. So everything around Al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak in the old city, in the city of Jerusalem, are being Judaized. So much so that they've introduced such laws, such a system wherein the Palestinian people are being restricted. The Palestinian people don't have the freedom and the right. They are being forcefully removed and directly having a course on silencing the Murabitin and Murabitat. You'd recall, and I would like our viewers to understand and to read up the phenomenal role that the Murabitat, the females and the women played in the preservation and protection of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mubarak. And what has happened now? They have been forced, silenced. They can no longer have the rights of going to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mubarak and standing and protesting and saying Al-Aqsa is ours and so forth and so forth. So these are all part of the Zionist plan. Likewise, it is the government that support these particular notions and these particular actions. So much so that they are funding the incursions. The government are funding these incursions, which means that you do it on our behalf, we will fund you and you can continue to do so. What adds even greater to that is this Ben Ghafir and some of these politicians that has walked on the Mubarak land of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak with the filth of this. So much so that now he has claimed and he said, he has announced to build a Jewish synagogue inside the compound of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. The other day, I was explaining to our community, this Taqseemul Zamani and Taqseemul Makani is real. What is this? It is a threat to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mubarak when the Zionists have said, we will divide Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mubarak both in terms of time and in terms of space. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyul azim. And therefore, Jamaatul Muslimin and our dear viewers, our appeal to you is, we cannot be silent. We must not be silent. You have a responsibility, I have a responsibility, we have a collective responsibility as an ummah. We have to start speaking to here in South Africa, we have to address letters continuously and consistently to the Arab embassies. We have to write to these ambassadors and be able to say, as a South African Muslim community that is in the forefront for the protection and preservation of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mubarak, we are appealing to you and calling upon you that you cannot be silent. You must raise your objections to the Zionist Israeli apartheid state. And you must be able to say that we will not tolerate this. We won't allow these type of incursions and violations at Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. It is very, very serious, Muslimin. When Sheikh Raid Sarah raised this particular slogan, Al-Aqsa fi Khatar, Maulana Ibrahim, you would know 20 odd years ago, the extent of where currently these violations are is really something that he might have envisaged at the time, but we are practically living it and we are witnessing it and we are seeing it, these particular violations at the Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. And therefore, you know, Al-Aqsa, the Tufan Al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa storm is precisely directed at this. Therefore, we've got to salute the people in Gaza. We've got to salute the men, the women, the children in Gaza. They have understood their priority. They've understood that our duty and responsibility is Al-Aqsa, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. Their sacrifice, they're giving their lives. What they've experienced during this 471 odd days, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and what the people are experiencing now in the West Bank, la ilaha illallah. It is meant for this ummah to stand up and to rise and to be able to say that we must equally play our duty and our responsibility. What is our duty and responsibility? Let us not be silent. We cannot allow to be silent. We must not be silent. Raise the subject of Al-Aqsa al-Mubarak. This is the masra of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If tonight we have gathered here and across the world where the Muslim Ummah are gathering and we are speaking about Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa al-Mubarak, then the fact of the matter is it has got to do with the masra of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is every inch of this Mubarak land is a land where the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam has stood, where they've made sujood, where the beloved Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam went to meet Allah and he returned from the Arsh, returned back to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mubarak. You have a duty, I have a duty, we all have a duty and responsibility. And therefore, to our viewers here, we would want to say, let's keep this subject alive. This Al-Aqsa week is a very important week. It is a week to raise the slogan of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak, and that we must be able to stand very firm and strong against these Zionist brutalities, against Zionist occupation, and we must have faith and conviction. Like on this Mubarak night, when Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was told about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam Isra wa Mi'raj, why is it that he is given the name As-Siddiq, truthful one? Because he believed in every single message of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Like the Sahaba, we must have the conviction that inshallah al-Aziz, with our steadfastness, with the steadfastness of the Palestinian people, with the steadfastness of the people of Gaza, inshallah al-Aziz, with the leadership of Hamas, inshallah al-Aziz, Al-Aqsa al-Mubarak will be liberated. We must not forget to make dua for the Murabitin and Murabitat. Allahu Akbar, what they endure is beyond our comprehension, but they remain focused that Al-Aqsa is our duty, is our responsibility. The Zionists, no Israeli has got any right over Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. That right belongs solely to the Muslim Ummah and to Islam and to the Muslim community, inshallah al-Aziz.
Barakallahu feek, Maulana, joining us live from the sidelines of your masjid. We do appreciate your time, and we hope for the best of all the activities that you are engaged in on your side as well. Shukran for joining us on this live stream and connecting with our audiences all over the world.
Jazakumullah Maulana, may Allah make this program to be a huge success. Inshallah, Jazakumullah brother Khalid and your team. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Powerful voice. That's the president of the United Ulama Council of South Africa, and very passionate, as you can tell from the voice. To our listeners, welcome. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Good evening if you're just joining us from wherever you're joining us. The live stream that we've got going is from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond. We've had 3 amazing speakers already, Dr. Khalid El Awaisi, Brother Mansour Shouman, both of whom joined us while they're traveling in different parts of the world, away from their homes, but still making time for the cause of Palestine. And Maulana Abdul Khaliq Ali took time off from his lecture series at the mosque to enlighten our viewers. Thank you from wherever you're joining us from. Please do hit the subscribe button on both channels, whichever channel that you are watching us on, whether it's Social Intifada, whether it's First Qibla on behalf of Palestine Information Network. Remember to drop your comments in the box below, and if we've got time for them with our guests, we will definitely look at answering those. We've got our next guest on standby and available already. We're going to welcome our dear sister Zarefah, who's joining us from, I believe it's early morning or it's afternoon in the United States.
Yes, I'm in Seattle, Washington right now.
So welcome, Zarefah. For the benefit of our listeners, if you're not familiar with Zarefah, I suggest you do get very, very familiar with her. Zarefah is a PhD candidate at the University of Exeter's European Center for Palestine Studies. She's received a master's degree in policy studies from the University of Washington, where she researched American aid programs to the Israeli military. Zarefah is an activist, she's a writer, she's an author, she's a researcher, and you'll find her on Al Jazeera, you'll find her on Mondoweiss, you'll find her in the Middle East Monitor, Palestine Chronicle, many other platforms. She's been featured at a lot of the rallies that have been taking place across the United States for Palestine, a very active campaigner, a very knowledgeable individual, and lots of benefit coming your way for the next few minutes that she's with us. Zarefah, on behalf of Social Intifada and Palestine Information Network, welcome.
Thank you so much.
The question I'd like to get you started on, and I think it's probably in line with your field of research and study. After what we've seen now of around 15 months of genocide, Israel had a certain narrative that they went by in the eyes of the world, of the West and of the South. That narrative has shifted dramatically over the last 15 months. Where do you think Israel stands now by way of narratives across the world? And the second question, while you're on that, is how best do you think our viewers and those in watching this at a later stage, how best would they be able to contribute to exposing Israel's colonial ambitions, despite what we hear from Israel and their cheerleaders on the various platforms that they're on?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. If any facade still existed that Israel exists and operates as a democracy, which has and maintains respect for international law, international rules-based order, this has been dismantled systematically over the last year, over the last 15 months. But this facade that it's developed is, over 100 years in the making, far preceding the official establishment of what we now know as Israel. The Zionist movement understood that in order to succeed in its settler program, it required the development and dissemination of popular narratives. So unlike a colonial regime, like the British Mandate, for example, in Palestine, settler colonial regimes seek a permanence in a territory. They don't seek to just simply exploit the native people, exploit their land, extract their resources. They seek to remove and replace the native people and ultimately stay in that territory for as long as they can, ideally permanently. So therefore, all settler regimes go through this process of establishing permanence and transforming their identities over time from a settler regime to a modern, legitimate state. And being seen this way by the world is incredibly important for their project, for their program. Now, this is done in a variety of ways and has been done in a variety of ways by various settler regimes all over the world. But the curation and design of narratives is what allows any step of this process of permanence to take place. So, for example, establishing legitimacy through the integration into world systems and being, understood as a legitimate economic and political partner, the adoption of seemingly legitimate systems of justice, also the curation of myths surrounding democracy, surrounding the rule of law, etc. But, for Israel, there have been monumental setbacks in this process over the last year. A process that, again, has been in formation for decades, if not over 100 years. Specifically, everything that is currently happening in the ongoing cases at the ICJ, at the ICC, its deteriorating status at the United Nations. But some of the ways in which this narrative enables this process of permanence is notably through the rewriting of history. And this is what I'm going to be talking about mostly in my segment today, which usually always kind of accompanies a founding myth, a myth of the foundation of the state, of the settlement, revoking the indigeneity from the indigenous people and instead bestowing it upon themselves. And once again, the integration of their historic and brutal modus operandi into legitimate forms of rule and government. For example, in Israel's case, this is, what has remained for a long time their historical narrative is this idea of a land without a people, for a people without a land, a narrative which is largely maintained today. I mean, something that I go back to over these last few months is, just a few months ago during a Kamala Harris rally in Michigan, Bill Clinton was invited to speak. And something interesting that he decided to speak about in terms of Palestine, with a crowd of largely Arabs because they're in Michigan, which is, you know, a densely Arab area. But also a lot of Democrats that are sympathetic with Palestine. He pushed these narratives that you think you only hear about in history books when you're reading, you know, accounts of David Ben Gurion or Chaim Weizmann or any of these people. But he said something along the lines of, I got news for the Palestinians, but the Jews were there first. Along with praising David Ben Gurion about how he had successfully created a garden in the desert. So these narratives that are so entrenched in colonialism and brutal violence and ethnic cleansing, these Nakba era narratives are actually, you know, turns out we've never actually evolved past those brutal histories at all, that these narratives stay relevant and contemporary, and we still are immersed and living amongst this history, whether or not we recognize it, but they're being very bold about it. Another way, you know, a priority that I find when it comes to reconstructing and reconsidering narratives that we engage with is that, you know, reclaiming historical narratives in particular disrupts this process of permanence for a settler regime. And particularly Israel's assertion that it is no longer a settler colonial entity, that it never really existed as a settler colonial entity. But if we use its own legal frameworks, we can completely deconstruct this point that it heavily relies on. So for example, you know, the subject of prisoners has been a pivotal issue throughout this genocide. You know, just yesterday we saw the release of 114 Palestinian men, many of whom had life sentences in Israeli detention or Israeli prisons. But if we take a closer look at the mechanisms which continue to be used to arrest, to detain, to torture, and contain Palestinians, whether it's in prisons, whether it's in other, you know, other containment methods like curfews, siege, these things, we'll see that Israel really, its attempt to outgrow its violent settler roots has particularly failed in this regard. So again, when we're speaking about the over 100 Palestinians released yesterday, they were all of them were detained using colonial British policy. In the colonial relics that are the Israeli military court system, which again was founded by the British mandates, the Defense Military Court Regulations of 1937. So again, we continue to be immersed in this history, and it's important that we talk about it this way, that Israel has never evolved past the point of this historic settler entity, that it has not moved past the thinking, let alone the policy of the Nakba era, let alone the British Mandate period. Another timely example is that of military curfews. Jenin has just undergone many military curfews in the last few months. And the military curfews, which Jenin finds itself subjected to time and time again, and other places, oh, sorry, I'm getting a call, and other places throughout the occupied West Bank, also find their basis in the Defense Emergency Regulations, specifically those of 1945. So when we assert this history and when we reclaim these narratives, and more importantly, assert a Palestinian narrative, we disrupt this process of permanence for Israel and expose Israel for what it truly is, and what it has always been. And that's not a democracy. And it's not an oasis, a Western modern civilized oasis in a sea of barbaric and backwards Middle Easterns, but an eliminatory settler regime, which seeks nothing but the eradication of the indigenous people and the theft of all of their land.
So at its core, and I think that's what you're alluding to encouraging our viewers and listeners to be able to understand that all of the practices that Israel's putting forward, even right now, is all based on settler colonial ideology, and that is the root of where they are today. And that's the root of all of their actions, and that's the root of whatever they might disguise it as, you know, in terms of the international media and whatever. that is the root, and that's what our viewers should understand better in order to be able to tackle them head on.
Absolutely. And engaging with it in this regard. You know, I think sometimes we unintentionally legitimize Israel as a democracy or as an entity that would respect international law when we engage with it in a way where we assume that this is that it makes logical sense for Israel to follow international law, or it makes logical sense for Israel to respect human rights. Because again, unintentionally, what we're doing is we're dismissing the actual nature of Israel, again, as a settler entity. And what do all settler entities, what is the ultimate goal of every settler entity? It's the eradication of people. It's theft, it's exploitation, it's genocide. So it actually makes complete sense what Israel has been doing over the last 15 months. And we need to speak about it in this way. Because how are we supposed to combat these systems? How are we supposed to combat the systems and the accomplices of Israel, for example, if we are unintentionally legitimizing them with the way that we speak about them and the way that we engage with them?
Excellent. I think that's quite important for the viewers to take on board. Know who you're dealing with. Don't unintentionally get duped into a narrative which they want you to follow, and then you're having a conversation on another level when that's not actually who you're talking to. Talk to Israel for who they are. Zarefah, if I could segue to another question, we've just got over a minute left. Just so viewers outside the US can get an idea or an understanding, what's the mood in the US like, especially related to Palestine with Donald Trump incoming? What's the mood like amongst the pro-Palestinian movements, the Muslim community? What's the sentiment like?
Right. I think it's an interesting time. And I think depending on where in the US you ask, the sentiment would be different. I think overall for a lot of Palestine activists, there was this feeling of relief that Kamala lost. But now we're having to deal with the repercussions of another Trump presidency. You know, this, again, is not only impacting Palestine, but there have been immigration raids on many communities around me, on communities across the United States, these people that have stood with us throughout our movement. And so I think right now is going to be a time of recuperation and understanding that now is not a time for taking breaks. We see celebrations in Gaza, we see celebrations in parts of the West Bank, but this is not a time for Americans to be celebrating. We can feel relief that there is a ceasefire. We can feel relief by the successes and the progress that we've made. But I think what we need to also understand is that we should still be feeling shame. It is not a time for celebration for us. These things have been able to occur because American taxpayers have enabled this violence. And our complicity in these systems over time that have created this destructive and violent two-party system where two parties, again, are hell-bent on our destruction and the destruction of so many communities like us. It's time for us to get even more organized. And I think there's a little bit of tension around this too. We don't want people to lose momentum.
Zarefah, on behalf of myself and the team and the Palestine Information Network, we'd really like to thank you for taking the time out from your Sunday. But we know you're always ready for the cause, mashallah. Allah reward you and keep you strong for the excellent work. We hope to see you soon. But we follow you closely on your socials and the work that you put out. So Allah bless you and keep you strong. Jazakallah khair for your time and for the benefit of the viewers.
Thank you much, Khalid.
So again, if you don't know of Zarefah, we've mentioned and we'll put the details out as well. Lots of interesting information. Zarefah's got detailed research that you can use to educate yourself, that you can, I think the important point there is to understand who you're talking to. If you legitimize Israel as a democracy, your conversation's already going wrong because that's not who they are. They founded on settler colonial ideology, and that's the narrative that they should be approached from, so that the narrative of Palestine could be reclaimed from them. We're going to move over to our next guest, who is waiting patiently in the studio, waiting backstage. Nope, she's just dropped off for a second. We're going to take a 30-second breather. And for those of you who've just joined us, we'd like to welcome you. I'm just going to go back to our intro, and we'll be back to introduce our next guest.
حكولي صبر سلاحي واخر صبر الموت كل شايف بس لا مش فارق صوتي حياة وانا واقف وحدي العالم ضدي وانا مخشى سلبوني روحي استاحل بيت في قلبي وانا راجع وبايدي ولدي ولو كل العالم كان ضدي أنا راجع يا بلادي راجع.
From Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond, welcome to everyone. If you just joined us, we're live streaming on YouTube at Social Intifada and at First Qibla, and going out via various other streams as well. We're into the second hour of our live stream, and we'd like to warmly welcome our dear sister Youmna El Sayed. If our team can just get her on. There we go. Assalamu alaikum, Youmna. I'll just check on our connection.
Walaikum salam. How are you, Khalid? Thank you for having me.
Jazakallah khair for the time. I know it's probably a late hour where you are, but for adding to a different perspective to our lineup of speakers, and for the benefit of our listeners and our viewers, as soon as Youmna received the invitation or the message to see if she's available, the response was, I'm available, like literally. So the quality of our guests is an example for all of us, in that for the cause of Palestine, we drop what we're doing and we make ourselves available unless it's something immovable. So Jazakallah khair, Youmna, for making yourself available. For the benefit of our viewers and of our listeners, our sister Youmna El Sayed is a Gaza Strip correspondent for Al Jazeera English. She's Egyptian Palestinian. She's a journalist. She pursued journalism as a desire, which we got to find out about when she visited us in South Africa not too long ago. And over the past 8 years, Youmna has worked for different international news outlets. So she brings a wealth of experience to the show and for the short time that we've got her with us. Youmna, the question that we have for you regarding, obviously we've had a record number of journalists that have been murdered by the Israeli regime throughout this genocide, in excess of 217. With mainstream media, painting a certain narrative when it comes to what we'd call a conflict, what they'd call a conflict, and not an occupation, does truth become a casualty? I see Youmna. Okay, Youmna's there. We go. We've got Youmna back. Youmna, sorry, I was posing the question to you.
Yes, Khalid, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you loud and clear. Regarding the mainstream media narrative and, truth being either subjective or objective, that's another discussion, I suppose. One question, is there a place for honest, objective journalism? Number one. And number two, has truth become a casualty with mainstream media, as we've seen through the genocide?
First of all, Khalid, I'm not going to lie. The Gaza genocide was, it carried a lot of shocks to all of us in terms of the integrity of journalism, the principles of international journalism organizations and their integrity, and even the basic facts, the basic principles of what journalism is. When you study journalism in any school around the world, especially in the Western world, you're taught about the objectivity, the neutrality, being unbiased, the integrity of journalism, the code of ethics in journalism. And as what like they call us, third world countries, the Middle East, we are lectured for years and years, not just about these principles, but also about international law, about humanitarian law, about so many things and ideas that we actually thought are true. And this Gaza genocide just proved to us that everything that was said, everything that was spoken about, everything that we were taught for many years and we believed is just a lie. As simple as that. And the fact that it is so clear that the people, the public, have now been aware of everything that is happening. They are able to say that mainstream media is not reporting with objectivity, it's not reporting with honesty, and it is completely biased to the Israeli narrative. That has become very clear to the people everywhere in the world, and everyone is speaking about this now. Everyone is even talking about this in a way that just really shows the wrongdoing of these Western journalism organizations. And it's really a shame that journalism, which is supposed to be an authority of itself, the job or the main reason, the main objective of journalism is to hold those in power, to hold those who do wrong accountable for the wrongdoing, regardless of everything and regardless of anything. That reality, that fact has completely changed. It was completely unimplemented. And the fact that the reporting of everything that has to do with the Gaza genocide, the Israeli attacks on Palestinian civilians, the terms, the definitions, the way the news is being reported, it's really sad because it's full of misinformation and disinformation, which is unrealistic and unfactual, which means in other ways it's a lie. It just shows that everything has just turned in one direction, which is all these journalism organizations have just sided with Israel simply because their countries are allies with Israel. And of course, that doesn't go with everyone. That is not. We have witnessed and we have seen other journalism organizations that have fought this battle, although it has been a very fierce battle on them, but they have fought it for over 15 months now and are still fighting it. And these are the true journalistic organizations. These are the true journalists. So yes, there is truth, but it is battled, and it's battled in a very fierce way. And it's not just a battle of truth and lies. It's actually a battle of allies, because when you choose to support a side over the other, regardless of all the facts and realities that you see in front of you on the ground, then this is not even journalism anymore.
That's an important, I think, because a lot of, I would say a vast majority of the public get the information of world affairs from what they see on mainstream media. So when we turn on our TVs, we go to the mainstream media channels, your CNNs, your BBCs, your ABC networks. And my question is more in terms of these media corporations. They're not there to serve a truth, but they're more there as a business, as a corporation, to be able to further an agenda. Would you say that's more an accurate description? So the viewers then need to be more careful and more selective about which channels they source the information from.
Well, I really believe, Khalid, that this is the reality, what you just described. And I think that the majority of the public now is very much aware of this reality. And that's why even when they stream mainstream media, they go to select and to see the headlines of every mainstream media about the same exact news. And they can differentiate and they can read. And now, this is the good thing among the public, is that they read and they find out. And this is just amazing, because just a year ago, we did not have that same level of awareness, which it cost us a lot. We paid as Palestinians a very heavy price until we got the public to actually turn around and pay attention to what's happening in the Gaza Strip. I mean, for about 8 months, the first 8 months of this genocide, there was no that awareness among the people, among the public. Some people didn't even know about what was happening in the Gaza Strip. It's the only documented genocide in history. It's a live streaming genocide, and yet people among the world didn't even know it existed because they never saw it on their channels. They never saw it on their mainstream media. And that's why it took us such a long time. And I've said this over and over again. Palestinians, it took us 8 months. We paid a very heavy price for the people to pay attention to what's happening in the Gaza Strip and to start talking and to start searching and to start following and to start speaking out or speaking up about the genocide, to start protesting and going out in the streets to say or to call for a ceasefire, to say end this genocide. And then the awareness started happening. And I'll tell you something, Khalid. Most journalists are very much upset that the majority of the public take their news through social media platforms. But in reality, journalists are the main reason why the public are following social media platforms. Because when you have an ongoing genocide day and night, non-stop, and your channel or your mainstream media is not even airing anything about it or even talking about it or barely talking about it, then there's something wrong. Then this is not the right place where I need to follow what is really happening in the world. Being selective on events that are happening, this is the major issue. This is the major problem. And we're not talking about an event that isn't significant or important or less important than other events that are happening in the world. I don't think that there's anything more important in the world than people being slaughtered day and night in front of the eyes of the entire world, while the entire world watches in silence and complicity. So if you are not watching that, if you are not being able to watch that on your mainstream media, then it is okay for you to go and search for social media platforms and other mainstream media channels to actually get your news from. And then you can't blame the public for searching for other places to get their news, because you did not do your job as a mainstream media or as a journalist.
I think that's a crucial point, and for viewers who just want to understand a little bit of what Youmna is talking about, in terms of, we know the genocide's been ongoing for 15 months, but when Youmna says it took 8 months for Gaza to show the world, to get the world to pay attention to what was going on, you'd recall when Youmna was reporting from Gaza, and I'm sorry if this evokes memories for Youmna, because you've carried a lot of pain while you were doing your job, and we can't even begin to imagine what it takes to be able to put on your vest and your helmet every day and go out and interview people who are literally being bombed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody you had interviewed was literally carrying parts of their relative's body on the backpack or in a knapsack or something while you were interviewing them. This is the price that Palestinians have had to pay just so the world could stop and take a look at what's going on and to lift the blinkers, that we use in our everyday lives, which I think, thanks to journalists like yourself and the many selfless journalists who've done their work in Palestine and who've obviously started their own social media platforms because mainstream media wasn't allowing them that room, have now allowed us to see and for people to lift the lid on what's actually going on in Gaza and in Palestine. So, we are indebted to you. We're indebted to all those journalists. We're indebted to all those who've been martyred, 200 plus, to their families. We know you've lost people close to you, colleagues close to you, literal siblings to you. Absolutely nothing but respect to you. And your recent award on behalf of Social Intifada and Palestine Information Network and our viewers, congratulations on your recent award. You received the Journalism Perseverance Award at the Reach Forum. It's well deserved. Many more of those for the excellent work you've done, Youmna. Jazakallah khair to you. And we look forward to listening to more of you and your enlightenment going forward, because we've got new challenges ahead. I'm sure you'd agree. That was Youmna, and I think our connection. So just there's quite a bit to unpack there, but I'm going to let that stew with our viewers, Maulana Ebrahim, because the perfect segue into what Youmna was talking about is our next guest, who is, with regards to the social media alternative to mainstream media and to the narrative that has been portrayed by mainstream media, which has just been all over the place. The one thing that has shifted in this genocide in terms of lifting the lid on information and disinformation has been the use of social media channels with all the issues that we faced. And it's one of our most prominent activists on social media. I'm so pleased to welcome our brother Moath, known on Instagram as Mo Hamzeh. Welcome, Jazakallah khair. I know you've had a busy schedule, you've had other events that you're busy with, but it's so good to see that beautiful smile on our face, and welcome to the stream, mashallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Khalid. I really appreciate the intro. And first of all, I actually want to thank Social Intifada for hosting this, and thank you to the rest of the panel for your amazing insights and efforts to fight for our cause. I just want to focus here, or like it or not, this movement has become a massive movement of our youth. And this is not discounting from all of us older folk of the movement that I think are doing a great job. But the social media movement, from TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to even international platforms like Red Note, are the source of where we are today, which is a world that's not just on the side of Palestine, but on the side of the Palestinian resistance. And that is not a phrase that I've ever in my entire life been able to think I could ever say, which is truly why I believe for the first time in my lifetime, we will see a free Palestine in our lifetime, inshallah. Even with all of the censorship, the shadow banning, the account suspensions, our movement is so large and so global that it's literally impossible to silence us unless they remove all the social media platforms from existence, which is what you guys have seen with TikTok. But our youth and our movement found other options to keep our movement loud and strong. The social media movement, in my opinion, is the most important movement, because with the obvious lies and false narratives being spouted by Western media and the active silencing of our journalists on the ground in Gaza, either through targeting and killing of our journalists or cutting off their electricity and their networks, social media has become the main source of news internationally. And as Youmna mentioned, Gaza journalists risk their lives every single day, not just to send their footage to Al Jazeera or even the Western media, is to send it directly to us, the people that know the truth and can share the truth with the entire world without any bias. We have become louder than the Western media at this point, which is a battle that we have won. But this is not just a battle, it's a war of truth. And we must continue to fight harder than ever. It's important that we do not get complacent. We do not sit back. We must keep fighting harder than we've ever fought. And Palestine has opened everyone's eyes in this regard. Palestine has exposed this on such a massive scale where the world now sees the interconnectedness of everything, which stems from Zionism, colonialism, capitalism, dehumanization, and Western lies and propaganda. My platform, which only started as a measly 2,000 followers just last year, has amassed close to 115,000 followers. And that is with my account being actively targeted by Meta, and Meta ghost unfollowing over 700 accounts from my account per week without the user's knowledge. Even with all of this working against us, our platforms are continuously growing because the world wants to hear pure, unfiltered, unadulterated, raw, honest truth. And that is why my platform that's what my platform is being used for. And I'm completely unapologetic about the plight of my people, of the Palestinian, and the passion and my passion for the end goal, which is total freedom and liberation and one true state called Palestine. So with regard to social or the social media sourcing of information, I want to, and what to share on social media, I want to run through a few vital points here for you guys. It's always important to use reputable sources. This especially means that our journalists from the ground in Gaza. It's important not to post anything that is not properly vetted, or else we become just like them. We become the liars and propagandists that they are. So always stick to facts. It's also important to continuously expose who they are, not just through their barbaric violence, but their perverted, sick nature, and to ensure that the people know that it's the majority of their society that are like this. It's not just a few bad apples or just Netanyahu or just his government. It is truly the majority of their society that is approving of what is happening in Gaza. It is also important to note that words matter, such as calling what we are seeing not just a genocide at this point. It's a Holocaust. It's not Palestinian prisoners, but Palestinian hostages. It's not 40,000 killed in Gaza. It's closer to 350,000 plus. So it's also critical to understand that Palestinian voices are the most important voices and must be amplified the most in every single case. But that does not mean shunning non-Palestinians out, because we need them if we want to see complete and total liberation. We must amplify people of all walks of life, because it's not just about the occupation of Palestine, but it's also about the occupation of our collective minds globally and the oppression of people all around the world. So do not ostracize anyone. We must unite across the entire world. And lastly, we must be completely unapologetic at this point. We cannot hide. We cannot be silent. This is the breath of fresh air that the world is yearning for, and because the world has had enough of their lies, in a sense. So that's all I had from a social media perspective. But if you have any questions regarding, I guess, my what I do on social media, please feel free to shoot the questions to Khalid.
Jazakallah khair. So I think you've covered a few important points. What we would like to do is to get our viewers to encourage more of what you've been doing. And I think the fact that you've just mentioned you started off with a small account of 2,000, and now you are an account that is actively being watched by Meta. There's a reason they're watching you. You're speaking the truth. What strikes me from your content, and I'm sure the viewers would agree, is the fact that you combine originality from an authentic source. So you've given it your stamp. We know it's your content when we see it, and your content gets shared widely. People download it, they share it on WhatsApp, it goes on to TikTok, it's all over. What type of encouragement would you give potential social media users, content creators who might be a little hesitant to be able to get started, or they've got small accounts, they're not sure how to get started? What should they do? What kind of advice would you give them to just get off the ground?
Now, that's a great question, Khalid. So that's something I'm actually actively trying to push even a little bit more now. I actually put up a post recently where there's this young man that made an incredible reel that is very, very creative. It's incredibly important to differentiate your content now at this point, because we all know, like, the terrorist non-state of Israel is essentially putting out so much, like, a world of hurt on our people, that there's so much content being thrown at us at every single second of the day that there's a content fatigue. You're noticing even reputable news sources not getting as much viewership as they should, because it's like just a lot of news being thrown at you all at once. It's important for us to take that news and extrapolate it and use it like to our benefit in a creative means. It's truly important. This is why I say that it's a youth movement, because the youth it's hyper important for the youth to jump in here from a creative standpoint. And I don't want to only like select the youth only. This can be applied to anybody of any age, but it's important to use that news and think of ways to really pull it through in a creative way that can really attract and catch the eye of the people. So on my end, I tend to like have I do have a creative side to me. So I actually try to use my art, my poetry, and just the spoken word and video editing. Like I taught myself how to video edit truly on my phone. Everything you see that I post has been strictly from my phone, from apps such as CapCut, which just recently actually got banned as well in the US. But I taught myself that during the COVID days of the lockdown, and I was able to use that knowledge to really pull through a lot of creative things that I can do from a video standpoint. So it's truly important now, as a result of all of the news that we get every single second. It's kind of nauseating how much news comes at us every single second, that we need to catch everyone's attention more and more, because there's a pattern and habit whenever the word ceasefire comes up, which is a complete BS word to me. I hate when people say it. I cannot stand it, and truly, I do not say that to me ever, unless you want to get on my bad side, because we all know the pattern and what has happened in the past. They say ceasefire; it's never truly a ceasefire. They continue to, attack without any repercussion, complete impunity, and that's all it is. It's like it comes to us as news, and that's it. And people, eat it up and just move on. And that's something that we cannot let happen. We cannot let become a pattern. Again, this is the movement now that like I said, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And in order for us to open up that light or get closer to that light at the end of the tunnel, we need to be louder than ever, like truly. And that means, kind of thinking of new ways to keep people engaged in the social media space.
I think that answers the question. I just want to pop Lizzie Max's point here. She agrees. She's in his mid-60s. Her account is Dignity for Palestine, and you've taught her a lot. Taught her a lot. There's similar comments coming in, which we'll post in a bit. In your last few seconds, perhaps just one last question from one of our viewers. She'd like to know how to work around Meta's shadow ban, because the extent of it is staggering. Any tips for her?
Yeah, so I personally I've been doing everything in my power to, because I work in marketing and advertising, and I do understand the social space a little bit. And there are obviously trigger words and trigger things that Meta tends to latch onto. So obviously we are all aware of the, symbol way of writing things in our captions, which is so absurd that we have to do it. But I would say continue to do that because they can't catch on to the words when we kind of like make the word look like the actual word as symbols. But couple things that I've actually noticed on my end that I used as an experiment for myself and has been working really well on my end is if you're familiar with my content, if I ever do a post that's in words, that's like I take the full extent of the window of a post to put as many words as possible from wall to wall on the news that I am trying to put out there. I vary the font sizes in a sense, so that you'll see very small lines, large lines, small lines, large lines, all from wall to wall with different varying colors stacked in a way where people probably go cross-eyed trying to read my content, but it's truly a means for the algorithm not to pick up on the words. So I actually don't even have to include symbols sometimes in the actual post. And it's directly the words in the post. And because of that, I'm noticing that the algorithm doesn't pick up on the words and doesn't trigger it. And I say some really hard hitting stuff in there that is not just the news, but also my personal like direct opinion. And it's unfiltered, completely unfiltered. And it's been, doing really well from like a news sharing perspective. And then from a video perspective, it's there's this window of 15 seconds that like when people share the stories, that's typically where we get the trigger from the social media is if within the first 15 seconds, they see anything from violence or derogatory language or things that talk about Zionism and all of that in the first 15 seconds that are the trigger words, then they immediately either remove it or they suppress it. So I take the time to have a countdown, if you've seen those videos of mine, of 15 seconds where it's either my face or certain words that I know will clear the algorithm. And then once the 15-second mark hits, it gives you direct, raw video footage of the graphic violence or the, unfiltered, news coming out of Gaza on the ground. So those are certain things that I've personally found to work, and people are on the other users and accounts have actually started to employ this on their end, and they're seeing a difference as well. So those are a couple of things that I've noticed.
So we've managed to extract, mashallah, some good tips from one of our leading accounts in the Voice for Justice for Palestine, and I think for our viewers, brothers and sisters that are logged on, there's a lot of comments coming through. We can't take them all. We have come to an end, but I think there's a lot of value in what Mo has said in the last 10 or 12 minutes. We would be replaying this back. You're welcome to stop, play, take notes, because there's a lot of valuable information that you've got. At the end of the day, we'd like to encourage as many social media users as possible. 3 things I picked up from Mo that I just want to amplify. Use your creative side, use your words. Your words are important, and learn the way the systems work. And Mo's your example. Mo, Jazakallah khair. We know you've got another event to attend to. It's been fabulous having you. We appreciate your time. You are appreciated. On behalf of everybody at Social Intifada, Palestine Information Network, and our viewers, Jazakallah khair, and keep up the excellent work.
Thank you, Khalid. I appreciate you so much.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
And if you're just joining us once again, it's fascinating discussions throughout. We've just had what a powerful session there, giving us insider tips on the practical level, and that's what we want to do right now. It's been more than 470 days of genocide in Gaza. The way we pitch our messages cannot be the same, the way we pitched it at the onset, and it's going to be an evolution in the way we learn and the way we spread our messages. Welcome all once again to this live stream happening all across the world, and it's our great pleasure at this moment to welcome one of the most seasoned and senior voices on our panel this evening, the respected Dr. Azzam Tamimi, British Palestinian academic and political activist, and he's currently the chairman of the Al-Hiwar channel and its editor-in-chief. We were fortunate to have him at exactly this point in time last year in South Africa. Just to take note of the headlines of 2 of Doctor's recent posts or interviews, articles, one that appeared recently in the Middle East Eye, Gaza ceasefire, how Israel's colossal failure could reshape the global order. And another podcast that Doctor did recently was titled, Israel is protected by a wall of Arab rulers and Palestine will not be free until the Arabs are free. Dr. Azzam, once again, an absolute pleasure connecting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to this Social Intifada and Palestine Information Network live stream.
I think we're just working through some technical challenges on the side of Dr. Azzam. It's just working through some sound issues there. We'll on Ebrahim just a few minutes while he gets back on there.
All right, Dr. Azzam is with us on screen, but not seeming to connect via the audio. So, Dr. Azzam, as soon as you are with us, please just give us the heads up. But very important elements that we seek to discuss here in these few minutes with Dr. Azzam, who incidentally is joining us from a later time zone. So we are thankful to him for that as well. Obviously, we've seen the strength of the resistance as it shows itself on the streets of Gaza after this genocide. We want to look at ways of supporting the resistance. How do activists support the resistance? We also want to look at the benefits that we can reap, or how to reap these benefits. There's been great benefits for the Palestinian cause and this cause all over the world, but how do we reap these benefits, ensure that we don't fall back on all that has been achieved in the battle of narrative over the past year? And I think a very key focus area at the moment, as everybody has indicated, Khalid, is we all looking at Gaza. There have been some holdups, for instance, today. So there's always a big question mark over what is happening in Gaza, the durability of that ceasefire, and the credibility of the Israelis and their allies in those ceasefire agreements. But beyond that, the West Bank has been absolutely hot over, over the past year, but more so since this ceasefire agreement has been entered into. So how do we navigate that space, and how serious is the threat to what is happening in the West Bank? So I think those are some of the issues that we can pick up with Dr. Azzam. And just to indicate to everybody joining us, there's still much more to come in our discussions this evening. Let's hope we have a better connection here. Dr. Azzam, are you with us? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Once again, I see Dr. Azzam with us on screen. Dr. Azzam, are you able to hear me, hear us here from the side of the hosts?
No, I think there's still some sound issues there.
Dr. Azzam, any luck to hear us? Obviously, we all keenly awaiting the start of your input this evening. Dr. Azzam, do we have you on? Not just only by your feed, but your microphone is. Can you hear us? All right, still having some problems there, but hopefully that can be sorted out quite soon. Just to keep you updated in terms of where we are at almost the 1 hour 41 mark in this particular live stream, which is from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond. And we've heard the likes of Dr. Khalid El Awaisi, Mansour Shouman, Maulana Abdul Khaliq Allie, the Al Jazeera journalist, Youmna El Sayed, Zarefah Baroud joining us from the United States of America, Moath Mo Hamzeh, who's just left us a few moments ago with a very powerful input there, profound input with lots of practical advice. And we still got many PowerPoint-packed voices to come. Maulana Irshaad Sedick of the Irshaad Academy out in Cape Town, Shireen Falasteen, Sheikh Uthman Lateef. On the international law side, we have Nasir Qadri, and towards the end of our stream this evening, we've got Mazhar Khan. So still lots more to come, Khalid.
Absolutely, and I'm liking the fact that our community is quite involved in the comments and the discussions taking place, and our well-educated community is educating each other. So there was a question earlier from, I'm just trying to find it, regarding Palestinian prisoners. I'll pop the question up on screen. Are the Palestinian prisoners, in inverted commas, found guilty in courts, or are they actually hostages? Well, we know the vast majority, overwhelming majority of so-called prisoners have been detained without any trial, without any due course of law. These include children, and these have been reported on by international organizations and agencies, who have highlighted the plight of kids 11, 12 years old. We recently had a video of a 4-year-old who was being accompanied by his father to go and face questioning, a 4-year-old. So a lot of these prisoners, and some of the, wouldn't call them prisoners, we call them captives, that have been released yesterday and have been released in the previous exchange, and the ones that would be released in the coming days and weeks, none of them have gone to trial. Absolutely none of them have gone to trial. And that's the problem we're facing, because if you tie back into what Youmna has said earlier, into what Zarefah has said earlier, we have a settler colonial mentality here and not a democratic approach to this. So there's no law-abiding practice that takes place when it comes to Israel and when it comes to just snatching Palestinians out of their homes and out of their beds and wherever they deem fit. So you've got people in prisons for 20, 30 years. One of the prisoners we've heard who was released after 20 years of imprisonment was rearrested on the same day, a clear violation of the so-called ceasefire. So they're not guilty. They're not guilty. And if they do go to court, those are actually military courts, which children cannot be attending. This is according to international law and according to what we've read and understood in this regard. So kids attend a military kind of a court, and again, we'll use the word court in inverted commas, and then they're subjected to whatever. But they can be detained for as long as possible without any trial, without any question. And one of our other viewers have actually highlighted this as well. Amnesty International's report on Israel say these courts do not meet the accepted standards. So it's a military court. It's basically a kangaroo court. You know what's going to happen when you go in there. So that's something that we need to be cognizant of. And if you watch the language, and this is touching what Youmna has spoken on, if you watch the language that comes out of the mainstream media, in terms of prisoners versus hostages, they create a different impact in your mind. They create a different mindset. Prisoners is somebody who deserves to go to prison because of a crime they've committed. A hostage is somebody who has been taken. There's a massive difference in the wordplay between the two when we're speaking about Palestinians and Israelis. And there's a specific intentional reason behind the portrayal of those specific words in the mainstream media in order to elicit a certain type of response from the public who are viewing this. So it's something we need to be aware of. It's something we need to be cognizant of. And absolutely correct here. Some were taken from their beds at 16, some younger. So fully agree. We stop using the narrative of calling them prisoners. They are hostages. Absolutely, the Palestinians are hostages. And for more research, you can look at Amnesty International. You can look at the other major organizations that have done work in this field.
That's such an important point, I think, brought up by Mo as well earlier, where he, emphasized the need to be very, very outspoken or do not hold back in terms of the terminology that's being used. Use genocide and everything that's related to genocide at each given point when one talks about this. So I think there's a gap here that we have to acknowledge, even in platforms that we generally appreciate their excellent reporting on the genocide. I mean, if you have to take the Al Jazeera language book when it comes to referring to prisoners and hostages, we still have a bit of problematic usage of the word hostages exclusively for Israelis and not Palestinians. So if any due process is actually faced or adhered to be able to reference. But on the other hand, all of them with administrative detention, with the age involved, with military courts, all of this goes back to the definition of hostages, as we've spoken about, and there's a need to be much more forthright about it. And I think a subsequent point would be there's a lot of legitimate focus to look at what is happening in Gaza today or yesterday when these prisoner exchanges take place. And you see the show of force by the resistance, and you look at the messaging that they have put through, and you look at the excellent treatment, the ethics that they've adhered to in the treatment of prisoners. I think it's all great to focus on that, but there's nowhere near as much focus, even amongst people who are sincere supporters of the Palestinian cause. It's 4 Israeli hostages that get such a bloated amount of attention for certain reasons, but not the 200 Palestinians on the other side. Who is there to say their names? Who is there to tell their story? So I think that's an area that we need to also step up some energies on.
Okay, we've got Dr. Azzam is just having a few sound challenges, I think. So while we're waiting for him, we've got Our next speaker lined up for you, we're just going to add her on stage. Oh, there we are. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Shireen, how are you? Your microphone is on mute if you just want to unmute. There we go. Jazakallah khair from joining us from the West Coast of the United States.
What time is it wherever you guys are?
It's 10 to 10 at night.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, subhanallah.
So Jazakallah khair for your time, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. For our viewers, most of whom should be familiar with Shireen. She doesn't need an introduction, but I'll do her the honor of giving an introduction. Shireen's we've just heard from Mo not too long ago. Shireen's been one of the other very, very active voices on social media for the cause, to the point where she's had accounts banned, and now she's got multiple accounts, all of which are pushing out excellent messaging. Journalist, activist, speaker, US-born Palestinian, and she's navigating raising her kids through a genocide while using her voice and her skills for Palestine.
Yeah.
Phew, that's a mouthful.
Yeah,
I
some
can
of the
only begin
biggest
to imagine.
activism is at home.
Yeah, activism is at home, absolutely. No, Jazakallah khair for joining us on behalf of the viewers, on behalf of Social Intifada and the Palestine Information Network. We appreciate your time, taking time off from your family, and well, it's the cause that unites us in different parts of the world. And we've got viewers in from all over the world. Sister Shireen, I want to get you started on a question perhaps that you can enlighten the viewers on. There needs to be a balance. You juggle multiple roles in your individual capacity between motherhood, between tarbiyah, raising your kids, between managing your home, and between a genocide. Where does the balance lie? Or, in terms of getting adequate responsibility across to all of these, how do you nurture Al-Aqsa? How do you nurture Palestine in little hearts?
That is a very good question. And I like that you asked this question, because I feel like this is something that is discussed among, especially mothers who are activists. It's quite challenging because, of course, we all feel like we're never doing enough. Not only as moms, we have that mom guilt, but also as activists. So it can be a tricky space to navigate. But I would say one of the first things is just having that sense of community, mashallah. Like, in our community, we talk about this, and it helps to know that I'm not the only one struggling, both as a mom and putting my voice out there and making sure that my kids know and are protected at the same time, and that I'm able to get the work that I want to get out every single day. But what I will say is that balance is something that when you balance an inanimate object, you balance it once and it just stays. But we're moving beings, and so there's like this constant need to balance. So it's not like what I do today is going to work for tomorrow. And for my kids specifically, I like to get them involved to a certain degree. There's so much depressing and graphic content that comes out of our families in Gaza that I can't share everything, but I always like to bring them in when I can. And then what this does for me is it helps my kids feel like they have a voice and participate in what I'm doing. So if, for instance, if I'm creating a post, I'll bring one of my children and I'll ask them, what do you think? Should I use this color for the font, or should I use this one? And they usually have really good observations. He might say, or she might say, is it a happy post? Is it an angry post? And that's a very intelligent thing to say. And, I'll be like, no, it's a very angry post, and they might ask questions. And so this is a way for me to give them information and dose it, throughout the week. Whereas, sometimes as parents, we feel like we have to sit and tell our kids everything, but which is important. There's always a time and a place to sit and speak to your kids about, what's happening in Gaza and why won't it stop, or why are the numbers so big, or why won't the Arab leaders do anything? There's a time and a place for that, but where I have found is more easier is to show. So I struggle, digesting just the sheer amount of information, and the information in and of itself is very. Can you hear me? Are we good? Okay, we're good. Just want to make sure because it got quiet.
We're all good. We're all good.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, so I can't share with them everything, but it can get heavy on me. So there are times, for instance, like I'll pick up my child or pick up my children from school. They'll notice maybe I'm having a hard day. Mama's eyes are red. And maybe I've been crying. You know, kids notice these things. They notice, they're there. So they don't only pick up on the like bad habits of parents, but they can pick up on, you know, the emotional aspect and the good things that us as parents do. And so when they ask me, Mama, you know, are your eyes red? Are you crying? You know, they're very peculiar about these things. And it's hard to put into words why I'm crying, because oftentimes, you know, if I've seen something that seems familiar, like a family that has, you know, maybe she's my age, the mother is my age, or a child it's even hard for me to put it into words, like in similar age. And, you know, we've all seen ourselves in Gaza, you know, and that's our humanity. And so it's hard for me to put that into words, but I let them see it. And I will try to explain, you know, Mama, maybe there are some kids that just don't have toys and they really want toys. Or, you know, some kids, they just can't nap. And you know how your little sister is when she can't take her nap. She gets really, really grumpy. And it's really hard when that keeps happening over and over and over. It's hard on a mom, you know, it's hard on the kids. And so that's where I get to show. But then what I do is I'll give them tools. So the showing is always going to happen. So I let them see some of my work and I let them see my raw feelings to a certain extent, what's healthy for them. And then I'll give them tools and I'll tell them, you know, okay, Mama's, you know, not feeling well about this. And I'll give them some information on why I'm crying or why I'm upset or why I'm working so hard. And then I'll tell them, okay, well, you know, what I'm going to do now is I need to make sure that I'm making dua. Are we making enough prayers? Are we donating enough? Are we speaking up? Are we using our voices? Are we researching enough? And so that in and of itself will plant little seeds in their brain. And I've noticed that my kids will come back to me, whether it's a week, a couple of days. Mama, you know, I woke up in the middle of the night and I just kept praying for Gaza. I just kept praying for Gaza all night. Or I went to school and I donated. And I'm like, well, I didn't give you donation money today. Oh, I donated from my own piggy bank. But that's because these like instances where they see the activism in a daily, on a daily fashion, it makes it normal to reach into your own pocket from your own money, not from your donation money, and donate, to ask questions, to want to educate, to want to create events, to want to go out to protest. They ask these questions, and that's because they see it here in the house, and then I give them tools. So kids, I feel like, are natural born advocates. If you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. Especially if you have multiple other siblings in the house, they are the classic, it's not fair. That's not fair. They ate my cookie or they took something from me. So they have this natural like advocacy to them, which is beautiful. And we can nurture that. And they have a humanity to them. They're not desensitized yet, so they care. And what I like to feed onto that is they're not just picking up necessarily only on our bad habits. You know how kids love to do that. You know, they hear one little thing that you said and they'll just memorize it, but they're also noticing all of the good things. And so I try to hone in on that. And yeah, so I try to hone in on them being little activists, and they actually inspire and give me a lot of good feedback. And if you know, if you're a parent and you talk to your child often, you'll know what I'm saying. Kids are brilliant. So give them, like, let them into your world. You know, activism is taught, just like you teach your child how to drive, you teach your child how to read, you teach your child how to do activism and how to get creative and figure out ways. So for me, for instance, at this point in my life, one of the things that I can say to moms and dads, especially if you're the default parent like myself, which I'm very blessed to be, is looking yourself hard in the mirror and just admitting, what can I do right now? So right now, for instance, I have a very hard time going to in-person protests because I have a toddler that is doing her own protest with the seatbelt. So although I'm very successful in the car, putting the seatbelt on in the car, I am not successful when it comes to a stroller, for instance. And so she also has another habit where she likes to dart into oncoming traffic. So going to in-person protests, which I love to go to and I miss so much, has created a bit of a challenge. And I have a lot of FOMO. I feel like I'm just always missing out. But I have to admit to myself that at this point in my life, I can't do that. And that's okay. And to just reserve that, maybe in 6 months' time, I'll be able to do that. But what do I have in front of me right now? And what I have found is if I don't wait for the perfect opportunity to be active, if I don't wait for the perfect way to advocate, the perfect post, the perfect aesthetic thing, the perfect opportunity, then what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do it now. So I'm not looking for a perfect timing. There is no such thing as a perfect timing when it comes to parenting. You have to do it now with whatever you have. You have an Instagram, use it. You have family, talk to them. Maybe you have stubborn families that doesn't agree, you know, and we're not all born into families that are for the Palestinian cause. Maybe your biggest act of activism is the conversations behind closed doors with your family. And so everyone can do their own part, especially as parents, if we look at it, if we look at what we can do and not what everyone else is doing. So this is where my focus is. I try to look myself hard in the mirror and say, okay, you know what? I can do this. I can start a podcast. I can do online stuff. I could, you know, start doing events. And you know, alhamdulillah, the last couple of months, I've been able to do more offline work. But before that, I really couldn't. And I wasn't too hard on myself. So show yourself some grace, but don't think that there's a perfect opportunity to balance activism and parenting. It's just a mesh. It's a life thing, you know. You just got to keep it there, and your kids will be the inspiration behind so much of it. They are the reason for a lot of us to keep, you know, the news channels on, to keep reading. It's very easy for us to tune out and get mentally burned out. So our children can often like remind us and encourage us to jump back in and be more active and be more, you know, commanding in the way that we present ourselves and demand a call to action. So that's, for me, a very big inspiration. When I look at them, I know that I have to do more, because I see a mother in Gaza who's my age with my kids. And I ask and I wonder what she would want me to do, or if our roles were switched, what would I want her to do for me if I was in Gaza? And another thing that has helped me is I know that parenting is a non-negotiable and activism is a non-negotiable. And my activism as a teenager, I'm very grateful for my parents. They were such activists, and they really like nurtured this activism in us. But my activism as a teenager and a young adult and now looks very, very different. So what I found is I have to now plan it. It's not as spontaneous as it used to be. On a school night, a college night, we just go protest, do sit-ins. I can't do that anymore. And that's okay. So for me, I know that there are certain times of the day that, you know, maybe baby's sleeping and I try to get my information in at this time. And at later part of the day, I can create the content. And certain times of the day, more news comes out. And so there is an active effort to plan. And this is not by choice. I have to. Otherwise, I can't keep advocating for Palestine, you know? And so that little bit of effort and that recognition that, okay, the Palestinian cause is not going anywhere until Palestine is free. And I'm not going to stop being a mom. So there's a little bit of effort. And yes, it's okay. If plan A doesn't work today, in the morning you get up, I got this, I got to get done. Plan A doesn't work, scratch it, we go to plan B. I don't fret. Try not to fret about plan A not working and spend too much time, you know, being upset that, you know, your kids aren't, you know, doing what you want to do at this time. Just go to plan B. Plan B doesn't work, go to plan C, go to plan D, you know, and that's how it works. And when I do it this way and I just keep moving and having like that flexibility that you need as a parent to just let it go, let it go, let it go. What I have found is I've been able to maintain activism, being active on the Palestinian cause, and more than I ever thought I could be. Just having that little bit of grace for myself and just a little bit of planning. And you know, my kids, Smallah, they are always reminding me, alhamdulillah, when they see me doing what I'm doing. For instance, like this interview right now, they're in another room distracting the toddler. So there's a lot of collaboration in this house, and it's a must. And I'm just laughing at myself because there's, you know, it's a lot of moving pieces, but with a little bit of effort, yeah, alhamdulillah, it's doable. And I think every mom and every dad can do it with their families because it's part of us, you know. This is our humanity.
I think your advice is not just for mums. As a father, okay, I don't have toddlers; they're adults now, young adults. But this advice is very, very pertinent to fathers as well. And I liked what you mentioned about the intersectionality between your activism and your parenting. That's a major takeaway. So individually, we find that room, we find where those 2 points meet, because both of those are non-negotiable. And we've got a responsibility in both areas. So we need to find on an individual level where that works best for us and find the gaps, find the times. Your advice has been excellent. Exactly what I expected. Excellence from your presentation. Jazakallah khair. And I think, judging by the comments that are streaming in, you've been appreciated by the viewers as well. And inshallah, when this goes to a wider audience, you'll get a lot more comments. For our viewers again, Shireen Falasteen on Instagram, lots of amazing content, lots of useful content, lots of beneficial content, lots of emotional content, because it is where we're involved in. So Jazakallah khair to you and to your kids for the time, and to your family. We really appreciate it on behalf of Social Intifada and Palestine Information Network. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
And once again, Jazakallah khair. And this is the variety of voices that are coming through on this amazing event taking place all over the world as we speak. It is from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond. And we are entering into our second hour of the live stream. And the variety comes from talking about politics, talking about Al-Aqsa, talking about the faith-based dimensions, talking about parenting, talking about media. And we are glad to still have with us, hopefully having sorted out all the challenges that we faced earlier, Dr. Azzam Tamimi, British Palestinian academic and political activist, currently the chairman of Al Hiwar TV channel and its editor-in-chief. One of his latest pieces is called The Gaza Ceasefire, How Israel's Colossal Failure Could Reshape the Global Order. And it's so remarkable speaking to Dr. Azzam on camera today. 1 year ago, he was with us in person here in South Africa. Dr. Azzam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thank you for holding on so far.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Dr. Azzam, to dive straight into it, we know when we talk about what this year has achieved for the Palestinian cause, lots of sacrifice, lots of pain, but on the other hand, dramatic shifts have occurred all over the planet. With the ceasefire, or whatever the nature of the ceasefire is, how do we ensure in the coming phase that these shifts that have occurred are preserved and built upon?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, we simply have to keep struggling. There is no end to this. So long as the Zionist project is unfolding in Palestine, there will not be peace in this region. And we've just seen what the Israelis have done in Lebanon, killing 20 people today who are trying to go back to their homes, preventing the Palestinians from returning to the north, reneging on the terms of the deal they themselves signed. So you see, these Zionists will keep creating problems for everybody in the region. And as the struggle continues, hopefully the world's perception of what Israel is, what Zionism is about, will become closer to the truth. And this is what we hope to achieve.
You know, people would still say, though, Doctor, because they possibly have been doing this for so long, I've been posting on social media, or I've been attending this protest, or I've been doing X, Y, and Z. And now for this matter to reach conclusion, or for greater accountability to be extracted, they really, you know, sometimes call out for, people look for something bigger to do or something new to do, or should we shift from this strategy to another strategy? What are the demands and what are the practical steps that we could do different, or the small tweaks that could be made 1 year on amidst the new set of circumstances that we face?
I think it's only normal that a small minority of people will maintain the same level of activism throughout. The majority of people will become enthusiastic and actively involved when there are crises, when there is a flare-up here or there. And I think it's the minority of committed activists who have the responsibility to continue to remind people of how grave this cause is and how important it is, not just for the Palestinians, but actually for humanity. Because when we talk about Zionism, it is the other side of the same coin that apartheid in South Africa had. This is an evil thing. It's like the Nazis before, the fascists. And therefore, their threat extends to the entire world. They use all sorts of tricks of deception, of illegal acts against their opponents, whether small or big. And therefore, Zionism is a threat to humanity. And the people who are committed to this cause, who shoulder the responsibility of continuing to remind the world of this fact.
There's been this outpouring of reaction to the scenes that we saw last week, Doctor, as well as this previous week, the restoration of civil governance capacity to whatever extent it's possible, but it's quite tangible from Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and then the show by the Al-Qassam brigades and Saraya al-Quds. But as people watch that, you would still find a kind of holding back by people who would still support the Palestinian cause, but be very reluctant to say that this would be the future. And these are the legitimate representatives of the Palestinian people. So how do we ensure that people who support the Palestinian cause also don't only support the victimhood narrative, but are willing to support the resistance? And what exactly does it mean to support the resistance?
Well, this issue is not about Hamas. This issue is about justice in Palestine. It is about standing up to oppose a form of colonialism that is really one of the most brutal forms of colonialism in modern history. If people are motivated in their positions or in their actions by a certain dislike to this group or that group, that is really a distraction. Just forget about groups. Remember what this cause is about. It's about supporting the victims of one of the most brutal colonial projects in modern history.
There's a lot of discussion as well, Doctor, about the ceasefire as it goes through the snags that you described earlier. But people are also keeping their eyes on Lebanon. People are also keeping their eyes on Syria. People are keeping their eyes on the United States of America. I want to ask you here about the piece that you wrote that I referred to just a bit ago, where you said how Israel's colossal failure could reshape the global order. People have spoken about this being the moment of decline of Zionism. People have spoken about the serious reputational damage and damage to the integrity or whatever remained of it of the United States of America. And yet you see, in terms of the pompousness of Donald Trump and the kind of projects that he still seems to be propounding on a grandiose scale for the Middle East, there doesn't seem to be any kind of cutback or slackening of pace. How do you explain that if we are seeing the global order being reshaped?
Well, I'm really inspired by the young men and women on campuses across America and Europe who are now questioning the values upon which this world order has been set up. Not only the values, the mechanisms as well, and the hypocrisy that they have discovered in this world order. And the credit for all of this goes to Gaza, really. The bombardment of Gaza, the genocide inside Gaza, the steadfastness and the resilience of the people of Gaza opened the eyes of this new generation around the world. And the members of this new generation will soon be the leaders in their countries. Trump would have been long gone, and so all the other Zionists in America, in Britain, in France, in Germany, and elsewhere in the world who unconditionally support the crimes perpetrated by the Israelis against the Palestinians. And the members of the new generation who will soon be in charge of administrating the affairs of those nations will hopefully do justice to Palestine and the Palestinians, just like happened in the case of apartheid in South Africa. I still remember how in the 70s and the 80s, governments in the Western world were supporting the apartheid authorities in South Africa. But then, as the anti-apartheid global movement was growing, world stances, world positions started changing, from considering Nelson Mandela to be a terrorist to considering him to be the champion of humanity. This is happening, and this is happening today because of Gaza.
Lastly, for you, Doctor, before we let you go, there is increased focus on the West Bank. We've got these statements from Trump here talking about the absorption of Palestinians into Jordan, into Egypt as well. Just how dire, is this just a temporary measure of appeasement for the Israeli public in the wake of the Gaza ceasefire, or do you feel there's a willingness by Israel to go all the way in the West Bank, and do we expect a very strong pushback? Does the resistance in the West Bank have that capacity to give that pushback to the Israelis in the wake of these plans, if they are so serious?
We are not sure yet whether this is a plan or just some whimsical remarks on the part of Trump, who is, of course, a real estate agent and is influenced by his business interests. However, Trump needs to be reminded that Rabin one day said, the former Israeli prime minister, once when he was, I think, the defense minister of Israel, or probably when he became even prime minister, he said he wished one day, I think it was when he was a defense minister during the first Intifada of 1987, that he said he wished to wake up one day and be told that Gaza was swollen by the sea. Now Rabin is gone and Gaza is still there. Trump will be gone and Gaza will still be there. This is not the first time the Zionists, whether in Israel or outside the region, talk of the depopulation of Palestine, talk about transfer, talk about the alternative solution, talk about all sorts of things. And so long as the Palestinians are determined to remain in their land, and so long as there are people around the world who support truth and justice, all these plans will prove to be utter failure.
Doctor, thank you for sticking around with us. Again, very pointed, valuable input. And particularly just taking a cue from what you said about the responsibility of whether it be a small cohort of activists, but just to always keep the struggle alive and use every opportunity to, just reawaken the cause. And you've done this at a very late hour for you, and we apologize for the difficulties encountered earlier. But I thank you so much for your time and joining us on this stream. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Viewers, if you're just joining us, Dr. Azzam was with us. He's been traveling. He's in the Middle East right now, and he's a couple of hours ahead of us. So he's taken the time out to share valuable insights. And I think just echoing on his last point, which we'll touch on again later, Maulana Ibrahim, regarding the designs that they have that Trump and Israel would have on depopulating Gaza and depopulating Palestine. It's been there before. I think that's a good confidence booster for our activists and for our viewers. This has always been on the cards, but they've gone and Gaza is still there.
As the case with every empire that has passed through these lands, every oppressive system.
Before we've got our next guest waiting in the studio, we're just going to take a few seconds just to go back to welcome whoever's joining us. If you've joined the stream late, welcome wherever you're watching us from. Welcome on behalf of Social Intifada and the Palestine Information Network to our live stream from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond.
لي صبر سلاحي واخر صبر الموت كل شايف بس لا مش فارق صوتي حياة وانا واقف وحدي العالم ضدي وانا مخشى سلبوني روحي مفتاح البيت في قلبي وانا راجع وبايدي ولدي ولو كل العالم كان ضدي أنا راجع يا بلادي راجع.
Welcome back to all our viewers. Our next guest is waiting in the studio. I'd just like to remind you that your comments are most welcome on YouTube. To the viewers, thank you for your engagement. Jazakallah khair. Wherever you're watching us from, welcome. Maulana Ibrahim, I'll pass over to you.
Shukran Khalid, and joining us now on the other end of the screen, as you can see there, Maulana Irshaad Sedick. He is from the Irshaad Academy Neo Youth Foundation and been a very consistent voice when it has come to what is occurring in Gaza over the past year, taking it to the streets, taking it to the youth, taking it to social media, online podcasts as well. So Maulana, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us at this hour, and we'll obviously be appreciating your insight. But let's welcome you formally first. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا بكم. جزاكم الله خيرا for having me. I don't know how to follow Dr. Azzam Tamimi, but alhamdulillah you've placed me in that predicament بإذن الله. We'll try our best inshallah.
Inshallah. So what we do know is when it comes to the case of Palestinian solidarity out in South Africa, Cape Town has been one of the strongholds of Palestinian solidarity for years. We know the iconic marches, the iconic protests, the verve and the energy that comes out from Cape Townians and the leadership, even amongst the ulama, scholars, etc., when it comes to Palestinian activism is truly remarkable, and it's looked upon with great pride all over the world. But I want you to do for us perhaps a kind of audit. Let's look at South African solidarity over the years, and over this past year particularly. How has it grown? If you want to say what's the good, what's the bad, how can we improve? And particularly from where you speak to us tonight, we find Cape Town has been earmarked by some and is seen by some as a place where Israelis, Zionists want to semigrate to, or even Israelis themselves want to emigrate to. Is this a great threat, and how do we deal with the shifting landscape in the political space from your point of view, Mola?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm hoping that the sound and everything is sorted now.
Sound is excellent. Sorry, Maulana Irshaad, you are on mute.
Still can't hear you. I see
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Got you loud and clear.
Good. Okay, Bismillah.
Yes.
So the few points that I've managed to think through and perhaps contribute to bi'idhnillah ta'ala are 7. The first addresses local politics. But it's important that when we think about the bond between South Africa and Palestine, to understand that this is not just a shared history. It's also about a shared humanity and a commitment to justice, because we're speaking about a community that has lived through an oppression, as we know, as Dr. Azzam referred to, and that is apartheid. So this connection runs deep in the South African communities, especially here in the Cape, where the echoes of our own struggle against apartheid resonate with the Palestinian fight for freedom. Now, addressing the local political challenges, what we know is that our provincial government in the Western Cape, the Democratic Alliance, they have some Zionist funders and allegiances and affiliations. But now we're in a situation in the Western Cape where we are forced to work with them for governing matters. And recently we've seen their deliberate insertion and superimposition into Muslim celebrations, Islamic places of learning and worship. And by bringing funding and their support, they of course solicit votes, causing political amnesia and creating an uproar among the community. Now, this raises certain critical questions that we should be addressing. For example, what are the Islamic and legal implications of working with them, and how should we deal with them when we do work with them? How should we respond when they superimpose themselves into our events? And how do such interactions affect our claimed solidarity with the oppressed people of Palestine and around the world? Especially since we have, for example, many political figures like our mayor who hesitates to acknowledge the genocide, and these statements are well recorded. So these are urgent issues that we must discuss with clarity and unity without demonizing ourselves and our brothers and sisters. And of course, this is another issue that we've seen. So since the 7th of October, we're now speaking about strengthening our grassroots solidarity with our brothers and sisters. We've seen since the 7th of October an incredible outpouring of support and solidarity in the Cape, in South Africa, through protests, marches, prayer gatherings, fundraisers, awareness campaigns, boycotts, calls for boycotts, and consistent efforts, walillah alhamd, even though we may have felt that, there is not as much support as there was initially, still there were those who persevered throughout. The Muslim community has always been vocal, but this moment also now taught us the importance of broadening our base locally, as on the international front, solidarity with Palestine has now transcended faith, and you don't find only Muslims on the forefront. It's now universally considered to be a call to justice, and this call for justice, this is a call that speaks to all people. Then we speak about collaboration with other communities that we have seen, and this has been heartening, but we need to deepen these ties, for still we find that this struggle is often reduced to one of religious alliances, and that is of course something we can work on, both at a local front, national front, and internationally. Our grassroots efforts must focus on uniting people rather than causing divisions, and unfortunately this has also been something we've experienced. So amazing boycott power and enthusiasm, but we lack coordination within our boycotts. We lack strategic, targeted, focused boycotts that allows and facilitates for the broader masses to participate while confidently knowing that their decisions and their choices will make an impact. As opposed to, for example, equating those who don't participate in boycotts, when our understanding of what we should be boycotting is extremely general. This, creating enmity within families and among friends and within the community, this unfortunately is not productive. It creates disunity and it weakens our cause. Rather, we should now strategize and see how can we have sustained efforts going forward, not just wait for the boycotts to be over and then go back to the same type of lifestyle, supporting the same type of products. Then on the grassroots level, but specifically focusing on the youth, we are inspired by the movements of the Palestinian resistance in the form of Sheikh Ahmed Yassin and his tutoring of the young children of Gaza, who now are the freedom fighters of Gaza. They are the Palestinian resistance today. Now, on the ground here in Cape Town, we have youth who are eager to support the cause, but they need focus and guidance to know that supporting and solidarity goes beyond social media, goes beyond showing up at the protest. We also need to empower them with the tools that that will allow them to lead and take this sustained effort forward. This means education, of course. And this is not just education about Palestine, but about the broader principles of justice and resistance. And this is enshrined within, the monotheistic faiths like Islam. And for young people to empower themselves and be inspired by principles of justice, seeing their heroes fighting for justice, just like our forefathers in South Africa fought for their own freedom against the apartheid regime. This should inspire a rekindled resistance on an international front, that not just the Palestinians, but until oppression is completely eradicated everywhere, we don't consider ourselves done with our resistance movement. So youth must see themselves as part of a global movement. Educational programs should highlight the parallels between apartheid and South Africa and make them understand that the situation in Palestine is no different, as has been confirmed by Amnesty International, Beit Salim, Human Rights Watch, and other organizations, calling it apartheid. Like, we've lived through it, our forefathers had lived through it and struggled through it. Can we rest while others continue to suffer underneath such struggles? Then, of course, and this is probably one of the most important discussions, is the legal and international accountability. So we as South Africans are very proud of the ICJ legal action in order to prove that Israel is guilty of a genocide. But we must also address the contradictions at home. So, for example, some South Africans are still fighting in the IDF, the IAF as it is also referred to. Right? Some South Africans still feel that they are completely blameless and they are completely guilt-free, can go there, participate in a genocide, come back home, and just work their way back into society as though nothing had taken place. So what legal recourse do we have against them? I can't answer all of these questions, but these are problems that we need to be thinking about. And additionally, how can we leverage our moral authority as South Africans? We have a unique position, those who lived through apartheid. This is why the ICJ case was received with the revel that we've witnessed. We need to push for global accountability and challenge dehumanizing labels as well. This has been referred to earlier on by Maulana Ebrahim and Dr. Azzam. This hesitation to support the Palestinian resistance. We were also labeled as terrorists. Nelson Mandela, as Dr. Azzam reiterated before, or rather that I will reiterate, he was dubbed terrorist number one. And yesterday's terrorist becomes today's hero. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. We see the West dealing with these challenges, even now with the liberated Syria, having to deal with people who they once considered to be the prime, or rather the primary enemy. Then overcoming our challenges, some of which have been addressed before, transforming our social media, transforming our protest power, transforming our activism into real world sustained action that can take us forward. The type of actions that we've been handling to date are actions that were necessary and actions that potentially could have an impact going forward, but we now need to be more strategic about it. So how do we ensure that that same passion that we see results into long-term commitment? This is a major question. And then finally, I conclude on this, building a global narrative around resistance. This is critical, right? We have an example here as South African citizens, because of apartheid, having seen what freedom fighters mean and the difference that they make in a resistance movement, how they were branded as terrorists. Today, Palestinians face similar dehumanizing labels, and we have the right to say something about it, and we should utilize that right, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So we've been countering this narrative locally, but we could do more, inshallah, to make people understand that these are the true resistance heroes, our brothers and sisters who are on the forefront and have been in the forefront. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them liberation and grant them all the strength that they need for victory, and may we see true liberation in our lifetime. As Nelson Mandela said, our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. That's not just a theoretical statement, but that's something that we should live by as South Africans. Barakallahu ta'ala fikum.
Barakallahu Speak, Maulana Irshaad Sedick joining us there. I don't know if while you were speaking towards the end, you noticed the message or the comment from Kate that spread across the screen, where she said, as an educator, she noticed that South African youth know less and less about our own apartheid history. And that's also speaks to the broader point that you made earlier, the necessity of, if you want to say, a tarbiyah, when we look at the upbringing, when we look at the educational program that built up this generation of resilience in the Gaza Strip, it wasn't only about Palestine, but it was about all of these skills. So in a South African context, we also, if we're using apartheid as this reference point for South Africans, the shared solidarity, the shared sense of history, the shared sense of struggle, is it actually landing with our youth if they are not able to draw the correct parallel because of a dearth of understanding when it comes to apartheid? So thank you, Kate, for that, and thank you, Mona, for bringing it up. And a very pertinent point that you brought up at the beginning that perhaps needs to feature or loom quite large on our radar is the threat of the division of the community and the threat of the division of the solidarity movement and the threat of co-option, which very often happens through financial incentives. We need to always be wary about that. Shukran for your input this evening, Irshaad, and go well. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
And as we stand here, Khalid, we are making great progress. I still various global players to hear from tonight.
And we've got an active audience, very, very active viewership. Thank you. Please keep it coming, wherever you're viewing us from, wherever you've joined us from. Welcome to the live stream solidarity event online for Palestine, from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond. It gives me absolute great pleasure to add and to welcome our next guest, a dear brother, dear friend, scholar, advisor, Dr. Uthman Lateef. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wonderful seeing you. How are you?
Very well, alhamdulillah. It's good to see you, and been following all your active work continuously. Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless you and may Allah reward you. For the benefit of our viewers, Dr. Uthman is an author, he's a khatib, he's a senior researcher, he's an instructor at the Sapien Institute, with a BA in history and a master's in Crusader studies. Is quite a specialist in Jerusalem, in the poetry during that period of the Crusades, and very recently has published his first work of fiction. What's the title called? Shadows of Strangers. I would advise, we've got some educators in our chat, in our viewers, from amongst the viewers. Please look into this. I showed it to my daughter, who's an avid reader, and she was sold. Hook, line, and sinker, alhamdulillah. So, Jazakallah khair for joining all the way from England. To get you started, Dr. Uthman, we always, there's been a consistency over the years with resistance from the people of Palestine, wherever it might be, whether it's in Al-Quds, whether it's in the West Bank, whether it's in Gaza. We often, firstly, what do you think are the reasons or the motivation behind this resistance? Where does it come from, in your understanding?
بسم الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد كل ما ذكرون اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد كل ما غفل ذكر الغافلون. I want to thank Allah for allowing the chance for us to speak at this on this occasion, and I thank all of you for your very kind invitation to speak, and I reward all of you for your great work in trying to raise the voice and concern of the Muslimin of Gaza and all people of Gaza. I think that in many ways Gaza has tilted the axis of the world. We've seen, perhaps never seen before, such horrific acts of genocide as we've seen in Gaza, but in the same breath, maybe we've never seen before such a remarkable displays of courage and resistance and compassion and bravery we've seen in Gaza also. So I think that on the one hand, of course, we're seeing deplorable, horrific genocide committed against them. But we also see, in fact, and I think it's moving a lot of people, in fact, are embracing Islam or learning about Islam because of this. And they're looking at the people of Palestine and Gaza with kind of a new lens. a new kind of image and lens. And that is because we haven't seen people under such bombardment losing family members and losing limbs and losing homes and losing just civil infrastructure around them, but still having that sense, great sense of belief in Allah. And I think that there are like 5 or 6 things for us to think about why that might be the case, that people of Gaza are responding the way they are now in this genocide. Number one is yaqeen, certainty. And it's beautiful that when you hear, in fact, it's really remarkable that that one man was saying that, you know, he's lost everything. And he says, وَلَكِنْ أَمِنْ بِرَبِّنَا كَبِيرٌ, but our hope in our Lord is big. And that is something that we hear often, that even though they've lost so much, that they say our hope in Allah is bigger than that. And so I think the first moving point, the first level of motivation for them emanates from their deep sense of certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they're seeing the world, in fact, their own suffering, from an akhirah-centric point of view, meaning everything they encounter in this life is not limited to this life, but means something in the next life. That means that their outlook is comprehensive, holistic, in consideration of this life and the next life. The Prophet of Allah in Hadith says that, you know, مَا يُصِيبُ الْمُؤْمِنِ مِنْ نَصْبٍ وَلَا وَصْبٍ وَلَا هَمٍّ وَلَا غَمٍّ, that no believer is afflicted in pain and grief and turmoil and heartache and fatigue, even the pricking of a thorn, except Allah forgives his sins. So by way of it, so every injury, every suffering, if we connect it back to the Creator, is showing us that they have this deep sense of resolve in Allah, belief in Allah, and that nothing that they undergo is wasted, because it's all going to be considered in the next life. The second thing is servitude. So first one is conviction, second is servitude. So why do people of Gaza, for example, even though their mosques are just rubble and stones, but still they call to prayer? They make the adhan, you know, they make the adhan from broken homes and broken masajid, and they pray on the streets. Time for salah comes and they say Allahu Akbar. It's really heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, but also like uplifting when you're seeing that, because they realize that Allahu Akbar, Allah is bigger than that. So whatever they undergo in this life, it's like the one that they're serving is bigger than Allah. Is deserving of worship whether someone lives or dies. Allah is deserving of worship whether you're happy or sad. Allah is deserving of worship whether you have triumph or tragedy in life. Allahu Akbar, Allah is bigger than that. Allah is more deserving of that. So the first one, therefore, certainty. Second is the servitude. And the third, of course, is tawakkul, like having a trust in Allah. So we've seen, of course, those remarkable scenes of people like Wael al-Hadu, the one who used to work for the agency, and you saw how he was reporting, in fact, on the media, and then of course he hears the news that his whole family has been killed, and then after burying them, he goes back to his job, and you saw the sense of like just sense of deep trust in Allah. People like Khalid Nabhan and his granddaughter Reem, Ruhi, like the soul of my soul, and the way he carried himself. I think people haven't seen that before. A man with such magnanimity and such character, such discipline, such belief, such faith, such endurance, such patience, such belief in Allah, with such beautiful character, carries himself in a point of such a deep loss. And of course, he himself was martyred as well. And I think that that level of trust in Allah, tawakkul, having that profound sense of belief in Allah and reliance on Him, that everything will come out better. And it's beautiful. I saw those images of like Khalid Mahan, that he would, after his granddaughter was martyred and she was killed, that he would go to other camps and he would console and comfort families who have lost loved ones. And sometimes I saw one of his clips where someone had lost a limb, a leg, and he was saying like, your leg is already in heaven, your leg is already in Jannah. And I think just to hear those words, subhanallah, like it really encapsulates the level of belief and resistance in such people, subhanallah. So number one, certainty, servitude, tawakkul, taqwa, having belief, having fear of Allah, mindfulness of Him, reliance on Him, and knowing, of course, that He is always with them. And this is profound because, you know, of course, in the Quran, we learn about the believers at the point when the hypocrites gathered around them, and Allah in the Quran says that they came and they said, "Inna nasa qad jama'akum fakhshawhum," that the people have gathered against you, so you should fear them. So they try to instill within them a sense of fear and worry and concern because the armies of the pagans had gathered against them. And Allah in the Quran says, "Fazadhum imana," that increased their iman, their faith increased when they heard the words, and they said, "Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil." And I think that that expression of faith, that Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil, maybe we haven't had it before ever in a conflict. For the people who are the victimized and the oppressed in the land, still they say that sufficient for us is Allah and the best disposer of affairs. You know, I saw people standing on rubble of their home, probably their homes before, and they've lost everything. The boy was lost all things, and the only thing he was saying was, "Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil," that's sufficient for us is Allah. So that means that their deep belief in Allah, even at the point of loss and difficulty, outstretches far and wide. It kind of encapsulates their whole existence. Everything in life means something, is purposeful. And I think that they have that deep sense of purposefulness, and that's something that they've been raised with. So for example, it's a great lesson for us, of course, as educators, as mentors, as teachers, as instructors, as parents primarily, how we raise our children. And of course, that's a school of humanity in Gaza. And I think that the world is now learning that you have to graduate from that school for you to be accepted almost. It's like, you know, we use Gaza like almost as a kind of subconscious frame of reference to think, how would they act? How would they respond? If I'm having a hard day, how would they respond? Something's so difficult in my life, but how would the people of Gaza respond? Something's going good in life, how would they respond? And I think that's a powerful thing. So certainty, tawakkul, servitude, taqwa, and then of course contentment also. So to say alhamdulillah, to say like it's similar to when Syria was liberated and they freed prisoners from the Sayyidnaya prison, and the man was going and he was freeing these people, women in the prison, and he was saying kabir Allah, like exalt Allah, kabir Allah, like make takbir, say Allah Akbar, say Allah, exalt Allah. And even in moments of happiness where they find someone alive under rubble, for example, and they say, first thing they say is alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah. You know, subhanallah. You know, the first thing they say is alhamdulillah. You know, when someone is alive, alhamdulillah. When someone has died, alhamdulillah. Like Allah is deserving of all praise and exaltation and all glory in difficult moments and happy moments as well. So that level of contentment, even in difficult moments, like is really exemplified, I think, in people of Gaza. So having certainty, having servitude, tawakkul, trust, your reliance on Allah, taqwa, and of course saying, and of course contentment. Then of course when things are difficult. And lastly, I would say like having this sense of real love of Allah and love for each other, and that sense of compassionate care for each other. And I would go back to while the Hadu, like you know, there were videos of him like going to, like I mentioned, other members of other families and consoling them, animals, looking after animals and cats and kittens and stray dogs and this and that. And I think that sense of, and also kind of like enlivening the children, helping them get through their tragedy by sharing a story with them, or gathering around the fire and singing a song. And I think that sense of this endurance and compassion, togetherness, encapsulates the Gazan spirit at so many levels. So I think that certainty, servitude, tawakkul, taqwa, contentment, and love of Allah, and maybe there's more things as well, but these things really capture attention about why the people of Gaza have responded with such magnanimity, and are responding with magnanimity today in the face of such barbarity that have been shown to them. And of course, all of us are inspired by that, but it should make us work harder, of course, in ensuring the liberation of Muslimin, of people of Palestine, and oppressed people all over the world. Allahumma ameen.
Jazakallah khair. I think so many people were asking, and you see this on social media feeds all over the world over the last 15, 16 months, as to how the people of Gaza manage to withstand the genocide. And I think you've highlighted four core essentials, which I would advise all our viewers to go and have a bit of a deeper look and a reflection on, in terms of certainty, in terms of servitude, in terms of tawakkul in Allah and trust in Allah, and taqwa and taqwa of Allah. Dr. Uthman, Jazakallah khair. We hope to see copies of your book in South Africa very soon, inshallah. And we look forward to following your writings and your articles and your advices online, and hopefully in person soon, inshallah.
Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair for your time. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Shukran, Khalid. We're at the tail end, but this is a stream that continues to just give out gems, and everything that you mentioned, or everything that every guest has mentioned, is so laden with content and richness and practical advice that I'm sure there's going to be lots of scrolling back in the feed, pausing to be able to soak in everything. And we'd also try to make it easy for you after this by excerpting certain pertinent points to share with you on our social media platform, Social Intifada. And first, Qibla, let's shift now to a totally different take on developments and bringing in a unique regional focus as we welcome now Nasir Qadri. Nasir Qadri is human rights lawyer pursuing his PhD in the law of armed conflict. He also has an Islamabad-based international advocacy group called the Legal Forum for Kashmir, and has authored extensive reports on legal and political situation in Kashmir. Nasir, I thank you for being around with us for quite a while, and welcome to this live stream, and the people who are joining us all over the world. Greetings to you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this online event, for the solidarity.
Thank you so much, Nasir. I think there have been certain acts of injustice or areas of injustice around the world that unfortunately, at least in the media space, have taken a back seat because of what is happening in Gaza. And I say unfortunately, not to say that it's fortunate to be able to platform such a magnitude of human suffering in the Gaza Strip, but just because of the overwhelming nature of what has occurred in Gaza, we haven't seen people talking as much about Kashmir or about the Uyghurs or about the Rohingya or about Sudan or other places around the world. Unfortunately, that's just been the reality. But if you could give us an idea as to what has this last year been, perhaps, in terms of what has occurred in Kashmir and in the struggle for freedom in Kashmir.
Thank you very much. I believe the issue of Palestine and Kashmir are two important issues of Muslim Ummah, because I'll briefly draw the parallels, because Kashmir and Palestine, both the issues, they're not merely the territories, but these both territories are living symbol of the resilience, bleeding but unbroken under the yoke of the colonial occupations for over 76 years. I think these struggles are linked not only by the shared histories of dispossession, ethnic cleansing, and relentless oppression, but by their mutual refusal to surrender before the machinery of imperialism and the settler colonialism. As everyone knows, Kashmir and Palestine stands as lasting testament to the unfinished decolonization of the global South, the current concept. The stories begin in the twilight of the empire. Palestine, in the wake of the Nakba in 1948, where over 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled. And similarly, the year after, 1940, a year before, in 1947, the Kashmir, the massacre happened. That is the start of the occupation, where over 400,000 Muslims were slaughtered in just 5 days. This is the one of the horrendous story of the Kashmir, but most underreported region on the earth. What followed in both the cases, the current is not just the military occupation, but a systematic denial of the self-determination, which has been guaranteed for the both regions by the United Nations Security Council by way of multiple resolutions. And the imposition of the demographic engineering, whatever is currently happening, and particularly post 2019, when the fascist Hindu Prime Minister, ultra-nationalist Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, he abrogated the status, and there are the illegal settlements going on. Similar case, whatever happens in the Palestine. So, and the use of the violence, both places, banned weapons, the massacres, there are as many as 23 massacres, where almost 100, 200 civilians, I mean, unarmed protesters were killed. So everyone knows that the Kashmir, a smaller territory, is one of the densely militarized zone on the earth. This is not a Kashmiri speaking, but a CIA fact book says that it is one of the densely militarized zone on earth, with 800,000 Indian armed forces ensuring that they occupy the territory. And at the same time, Palestine endures the constant expansion of the illegal settlements by the IDF. The tactics are strangely similar. If you see the curfew, they transform cities into open air prison, and the destruction of the homes during the military operations. If you see on the YouTube or any of the social media, there is actually more invisibilization in the Kashmir. But of course, there are similar kinds of the horrendous war crimes, crime against humanities going on in the Kashmir. And the use of violence against this indigenous population, it's rampant, it's going on. These not only these the world is witness whatever happened post 2010. Kashmir is one of the most people with the blinds, because the Indian used the pellet guns, and that lethal weapon, they blinded our children, our kids. But yet India is trying to control they're ensuring that nothing comes out. Only just 20% of these reports are coming out of India. It's because, the unfortunate thing. However, despite all these things, Kashmiris live, their blood is with the Palestinian. We have learned a lot. Our resistance, we have learned. I'll quote Mahmoud Darwish, one of his couplet. He writes, "Perhaps we have on the earth what makes life the worth living." For both Palestinians and Kashmiris, resistance is not just a reaction to the oppression, but an assertion of the existence. That's what we also believe. A declaration that colonial borders cannot confine people's outfit. Kashmir in particular, as a Kashmiri, we have drawn immense inspiration from the Palestinian resistance. The solidarity runs deep, just in the sentiment, just not in the sentiment, but in the action. From student protests to the artistic expressions, Kashmir have paid the price for standing with the Palestinians. You'll find the reports, so many Kashmiris who were resisting for the self-determination, for their own freedom, they were additionally held, persecuted for showing solidarity with the brothers with the brothers of the Gaza. Indian occupying authorities, they have jailed Kashmiri students for celebrating Palestinian resistance or raising their voice against the Israel aggression. So this resistance is not only confined to the armed struggle. We are also having some the indigenous groups who are resisting the occupation. Kashmiris have learned from Palestinians the power of cultural resilience, turning poetry, art, and literature into the weapon against the occupation. From poems that view memories of the lost homes to the graffitis that defies military curfew, every act of creation becomes an act of liberation. This is the power of the resistance. It transforms pain into the purpose and oppression into the defiance. Today, the same genocidal logic underpins Indian policy in Kashmir. As I already said, there are custodial killings going on, enforced disappearance. There are reported 8,000, more than 8,000 enforced disappearance, mass grave. Nobody knows who is buried in. There are unmarked graves, and the target of entire families, the persecution. I'm a lawyer. I'm outside just because I fear the persecution. My senior lawyers, my senior colleagues, journalists, human rights defenders are behind the bars. So, but the resistance continue and it evolves. Just today, as we celebrate the release of the elderly Palestinian prisoners, symbol of unwavering resistance, our hearts are filled with the renewed hopes for Kashmir. The freedom reflects the resilience of human spirit under the oppression, proving that even in the darkest prisons, dignity survives. We also desire for the day when Kashmir's longest political prisoners, which include Dr. Muhammad Qasim Fakhtu, who is languishing from last 34 years, Musarrat Alam Bhatt, the head of the All Parties Hurriyat Conference, Muhammad Yasin Malik, the head of the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Party, and Khurram Parvez, award-winning human rights defender, is under the terrorism charges. Not only this, our sisters like Nahida Nasreen, Asia Andrabi, and so many other women are lodged in India's notorious Tihar jail. Their imprisonment mirrors the Palestinian experience, where standing for the justice is criminalized. Just as Palestinian freed prisoners return a symbol of defiance, we believe Kashmir's prisoners will we believe that they will emerge victorious, embodying the unbroken will of the people. And lastly, as we reflect the connection between the Gaza and Kashmir, let us recognize that activism for Palestine on the subcontinent is not an isolated act. It is a moral imperative to challenge the broader system of neo-colonial oppression, the invisibilization of Kashmir, described by the journalist, as I already said, that the Kashmir is one of the most underreported region on the earth, must be broken. Just as the Palestinian struggle has galvanized global solidarities, as brother was already saying that there is not more eye on the Kashmir because of the geopolitical situation, so too must we amplify the Kashmir cause. In the closing, we return to the words of Sayyid Ali Kilani, who was a beacon of the resistance in Kashmir, rahmatullahi alayhi. He said, the blood of Kashmiri people at every step reflect the moon. On the path to freedom, everything is God's command. And the truth is this: from the lanes of Srinagar to the street of Gaza. Srinagar is the capital of Jammu and Kashmir. From the lanes of the Srinagar to the street of Gaza, the fight for freedom is one fight. The resistance is our resistance, and the liberation is the shared destiny. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah khairan, Nasir, for that such an important intervention and such a important focus after perhaps a lot of silence and a lot of absence on this issue. And just one part of imagery from what you've spoken about just sticking in my head as we talk about the amputated limbs, the mass amputation of limbs in the Gaza Strip. I'm just doing a parallel picture in my mind with all those young youth and children in Kashmir who have lost their eyes deliberately through Indian firing over the years. Just as tragic and just as big an injustice that needs to be remedied and spoken about. Shukran for your time and joining us here on the platform. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That's Nasir Qadri, which basically brings us, Khalid, to our last guest for tonight.
And I think very well placed to kind of round off all the excellent guests we've had and the excellent perspectives that they've shared for the benefit of our audience and for the benefit of those who are listening in online. I will pass over to you, Maulana Ebrahim, to introduce our final guest.
Yes, Mazhar Khan, activist based in the United Kingdom, with us this evening. Mazhar, shukran for hanging on and obviously getting a good idea of the different perspectives, the different angles that have been shared. Welcome to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited and to be allowed to speak on your platform.
So, Mazhar, perhaps, just digesting everything that has been said this evening, how to ensure that, you have such valiant sacrifices, you have such a valiant struggle, so many good minds put their efforts behind the struggle all over the world. They look at it from a media perspective, they look at it from a parenting perspective, all of that. But we don't want the struggle or the efforts to go up in flames. I think that's very important. But such a high level of struggle has been put forward. You don't want all of this to just trickle away. So perhaps your thoughts on that, general advice to the Ummah, and this idea of the reshaping that's taking place in the region, what we've seen in Syria, what potential Gaza has to shape the region. How do we reap that benefits and ensure that the old problematic order is not able to reconstitute itself?
Yeah, Jazakallah. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. I think Gaza has done so much. It's opened eyes which were closed before. It's opened hearts which were hard before. And I think it's at this juncture that Muslim activists, Muslim leaders, Muslim groups really need to have a hard look at what has just happened. Because we've been taught many lessons by the brothers and sisters in Gaza. And sometimes I'll be very honest with you, I actually feel ashamed and unworthy to even claim that we belong to the same ummah. The level of sacrifice, the level of suffering that they have suffered, and we haven't suffered likewise. And people say, yeah, but we're in a different place. It made me think of Umar al-Faruq radiallahu anhu, when there was a famine in Medina and the people didn't have food to eat. And Umar al-Faruq radiallahu anhu, out of empathy, he stopped eating foods that he had access to, like butter, ghee, and other things like that, out of empathy. And I'm thinking to myself, how many of us have even had that level of empathy towards the people of Palestine? Now, what can we learn? I think it's very important for us to understand what has happened. If anybody thought or had any hope in any of the existing states in the Muslim world or even the international world order, I think Gaza has shown that really there is no hope in any of these nation states that exist today. So for 14 months, we saw a defenseless people brutally slaughtered, tortured, starved, and none of the states lifted a finger. And that's no exaggeration. And people say, yeah, but some people did something and some people did this. No, they didn't. Because Gaza didn't happen on the 7th of October. Gaza has been happening since 1917 when it was occupied. And massacres happened regularly after 1948. So it's not a case of, look, it only happened now, give them time. They've had time over 7, 8, 9 decades we've had. And what are they doing now after all of this time? We saw that up till almost the very end, Turkey was supplying 60% of the fuel, 60% of the fuel to the Israeli, the Zionist colonizers of Palestine. That was being supplied to the army in order to keep their military machines running. So reflect on that. After 7, 8, 9 decades of proof of what this Zionist occupation is, Turkey was still supplying 60% of the fuel to that army. And then if you look at the other neighboring states, if you look at Jordan, when Iran sent over some projectiles, Jordan and Saudi Arabia were the ones that stopped them from reaching the occupied lands. And that's the level of treachery demonstrated by these states. And some people might think, well, at least Iran came out of it well. No, it didn't. Because when Iran sent the projectiles across, they notified the whole region what they were doing. They gave them enough information, enough time to stop them from going over. So, and if you look at Egypt, Egypt looked over the walls to see the people starving and being brutalized and slaughtered. And what did they do? They profited from those Gazans who had permits to leave Gaza out of the Rafah border, the regime itself directly benefited by charging $5,000 per person to leave the Gaza Strip. So the Egyptians benefited, the Jordans supported the occupation, the Turkish people supplied them with weapons, with fuel, and the Saudis, all of this time, have been itching to normalize with the Zionist occupier. So what Gaza has shown us, that the Gaza people, the people of Palestine, and by extension, this ummah, those people who side with Palestine, have realized that we have no allies in any of the Muslim lands. So the question now is, how do we go forward and what can we do? And this is very important because what's happening now started long time ago. You know, they got assurances from the Hashemites, even before the Zionist occupation took place. They got assurances from the Hashemites that they would tolerate the occupation as long as they got their own piece of land. The same with the Saud regime. So there's no allies in any of these states for us. Now, the interesting thing is this, that the Western powers, the hegemony they have, the real enemy we have is not the American state alone or Britain or France. It's the whole Western world order, which has got a hegemony over the Muslim world and by the whole world, not just the Muslim world, the East, Africa, Asia, all of this world, using their international tools. And I know some of the speakers spoke about the pride that they had in the ICJ bid that they put there and the charges that they leveled against. But it now shows that these institutions do not act against the Western powers themselves. They'll work against the rest of the world, but they will not work for the Muslims or for the Palestinians. And we don't need the failure of the ICJ to tell us this. For the last 70, 80 years, resolution after resolution has been passed by the United Nations. Nothing happened. And without a resolution, Iraq was sent into the Stone Age, Afghanistan was sent into the Stone Age, and the Western powers will invade Syria and all sorts of countries without resolution, without justification, without any kind of moral standing. They will do that without having the backing of their international institutions. But when Muslims step out of line, we are held to account and we are bombed into the Stone Age. So it should be very clear now that the ICJ, the human rights, the courts in Brussels, the United Nations, and all of these international institutions is neo-colonialism. These are institutions set up by the West in order to protect their interests across the world. They are not there to benefit any other people. So how do we as Muslims counter this? Now, I know some people have been talking about apartheid, and in South Africa we are apartheid. And you know, this, I honestly believe that the Muslims of South Africa, the ulama in South Africa, the activists in South Africa should be leading on this issue. You have the moral right, you have the experience, and you have a recent history in order to lead this. You should not be following anybody. You should be the leaders, because you know, I mean, we can speak, I can speak now on your show, on your platform, but here in the UK, we can't say this in the masajids. They're under lockdown. We can't hire halls to talk about Palestine or about Khilafah or about Islam or Palestine or Kashmir openly about political solutions for the Muslim world, because we are, if you try and speak about that, you are closed down, you are banned, you are labeled as terrorists. If you want to fundraise, you can do that. If you want to have tea parties, you can do that. But if you want to talk about real Islam, how Islam came as a mercy to the Muslims and the non-Muslims, how Islam came to solve the problems of the Muslims and the non-Muslims, economic, social, political, that is not tolerated. But the Muslims on South Africa have no inhibitions from their governments or from that the society at that time. You should be leading on this and using your pulpits, using your platforms to echo this and project this call around the world that Islam alone is a solution for our problems. Now, coming back to my point about apartheid, you know, boycott alone did not end apartheid, and people really need to understand that. Boycott, we must boycott the Zionist occupiers. Why? Because it's a moral and ethical standpoint. Whether it works or not, whether boycotting works or not, we have to boycott, because this is theft and we don't want to deal with stolen property. So we will boycott anything and everything to do with the Zionist entity. But this alone will never solve the problem. And boycotting alone did not solve the problem of, or did not remove apartheid. What removed apartheid in South Africa, and my late father, marhum, may Allah forgive him, he said to me that the people of South Africa should give shukr to the mujahideen of Afghanistan, because Afghanistan bled the Soviet Union dry. And people say, yes, but the Saudis helped them and the Americans gave them help and the Saudis gave them money. Yes, but it was the courage of the Muslims in Afghanistan that helped to destroy the Soviet Union, the straw that broke the camel's back. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, the propaganda the West had against about ANC, that it was the communist doorway to Southern Africa, and we cannot allow the unbanning of the ANC because communism will come to South Africa. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the West realized that we can no longer support or justify apartheid in South Africa, and that is what led to the unbanning of the ANC. But it's very important to understand, they managed it. They managed the banning of the removal of apartheid, and they managed the change. The South Africans didn't manage the change. The Western world managed the change. And they got assurances from Mandela that you can have your one vote, you can have your democracy, you can have whatever you want, but you will not touch the capital, you will not change the economic system. And Mandela agreed to that. And because of that, they created a new South Africa. So yes, you've got the vote, you've got your democracy, you've got everything, but you still don't have running water and electricity in many of the townships after 20, 30 years in South Africa. You've got capitalism, but you've got black capitalism. And in Europe, they've got white capitalism. And in Pakistan, you've got brown capitalism. And it's the people with the power, people with the wealth who are still oppressing the people around the world. So racism was one level of oppression, but the real oppression in South Africa and around the world is the capitalist Western hegemony around the world. And what broke that is when the ideological force that was a threat to South Africa, i.e. communism, disappeared. The threat of ANC disappeared and they abolished ANC. Now, what do we learn from that? What we learn from that is this. If we subcontract, or if we outsource the solution of Palestine to the UN, to America, to the Western democracies, or to any other institution other than to Islam, we will have the same problem. They will give us a new Palestinian state. We don't want another Arab secular state to add to the other useless 50-odd Muslim states who are useless on the international arena. We want a state based on the civilization of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, which is a home to Islam, not a home to the Palestinians, not a home to the Muslims, not a home to any particular race, but a home to Islam. And anyone and everyone is allowed to live there, Muslims and non-Muslims. And that is the practical way where Islam becomes rahmatul lil alameen, a mercy to the whole of mankind. So through the justice of Islam, the Muslims will benefit, the non-Muslims will benefit, the environment will benefit, the animals will benefit. This is the rahmah of Allah, who sent his messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam with the deen of Islam. And we have Muslims have to call for the political solution of Islam. And we have the means, we have the resources, and we can do this. And we really need to learn courage from the people of Palestine. We really need to learn the courage from the people of Palestine, and we should not fear loss. We should not fear loss, because if we side with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it happen even if we do not perceive it. Even if we do not perceive it. And we see the example in Ghazwa Khandaq, when all the Arab tribes came, something like 10,000 people surrounded Medina. So there were enemies surrounding Medina. There was no practical way the Muslims could fight against these people. The Yahud within Medina rebelled against the Muslims. They did treachery against the Muslims. The Munafiqeen were against the Muslims. Even many of the Muslims were fearful, but the Sahaba radiallahu anhum held firm. And they knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would help them. And then one man from Ghatafan embraced Islam, and they played a trick between the Jews and the Ghatafan, and they destroyed the Allied forces. The Quraysh left, the Ghatafan left, the Muslims fought against the Yahud, and they brought peace back to that land. So even if we do not know where the victory is coming from, it will come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Moosa alayhi salam led the people out of the occupation under the brutality of Fir'aun, and they went to the sea, it was the sea on one side and the army of Fir'aun behind, but they had faith, Allah will find us a way. So we need to learn from these examples that if we side with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we fight for his cause, we fight for the Khilafah, we fight for the unification of the Muslim land, Allah will make it happen. And did we not see this when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam established his political order in Medina? You had two massive superpowers on the east and the west, the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. They were so advanced, they were so powerful, they were so sophisticated, their buildings were sophisticated, their food was sophisticated, their militaries were sophisticated, their military was experienced and armed. The Arabs didn't even have a standing army. But yet, this army of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum brought an end to the power of Persia, and it became history within a very short time. And they brought an end to the Roman Empire. So we need to believe in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he said Khilafah will return, Khilafah min haj al-Nabuwa, based on the prophethood. And we are in that blessed time now. Allah, honest to God, we should put our heads on the ground and make shukr and give thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are born in this time. We are born in the time after the Khilafah Rashida, after the rule of the monarchs, after the rule of the Jabariyah, the oppressive rule. Rasulullah said, then will come Khilafah Rashida min haj al-Nabuwa. We know it is coming. We know that the victory of Allah is coming. We should be blessed and thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it is through me, or maybe through you, or the people of this time, this era, this generation, or the generation after us, that will bring about the promised victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, it's the done deal. It's gonna happen. So what we should do is we should work and work and work until we realize that goal. Like Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, when he knew that Istanbul was going to be conquered, he went all the way as close as he could to Istanbul to go and liberate it. He was a companion, but it didn't happen until 700 years later when Muhammad al-Fatih liberated it. Why? Because it was promised. It was a done deal, and people tried and tried and tried until Muhammad al-Fatih was the one who achieved the victory. Where are the people in this ummah today saying that, yes, Rasulullah promised Khilafah Rashida is coming? I want to be the one who is going to be amongst those people who bring the realization of the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Where are the people in this ummah who are doing that? That is how we need to think. That is the confidence we need to have. That is the mentality we need to have. And it is with that we need to move forward. And bi'iznillah, I do not believe it's going to be that longer or much longer before we see the mercy of Allah coming, the victory of Allah coming. And then we will demonstrate to the kuffar, like Salah ad-Din did, the mercy, the compassion, the dignity, and the care and the mercy that Islam brought for everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim. And we will deliver that. And we will fulfill the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he said, هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. That when the Prophet came, the disbelievers did not like it and they wanted to extinguish the light, but we will make it manifest. And this deen will reach every corner of the world where the light of the sun reaches. And this ummah is going to do that. And we need to be optimistic, confident, make dua that we are amongst those people that bring about the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khairan for keeping the energies alive right until these final moments. Mazhar, I think this is greatly appreciated. And obviously also channeling our perspective, everything that we've soaked in this evening, but ensuring that it is for Islam becoming uppermost, it is for the principles of Islam being upheld. Shukran so much for joining us, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Khalid, 3 hours, 23 minutes on our clock, mashallah, and every minute, every second, totally worth it.
Absolutely, and a huge token of gratitude to our viewers who've stayed on. We've had a steady stream of viewers from the start until the end now, well over 3 hours. But I think between all of our guests, Maulana Ibrahim, we went from Gaza to Al-Aqsa, and we definitely went beyond that. So there's so much to digest. If we could just one or two key points, if we could just reflect on, because all of these talks will be available again online, so people can benefit. And please share these with colleagues, with friends, with family. Dr. Khalid at the beginning, centralizing everything in that Al-Aqsa is in the heart of every Muslim. Al-Aqsa is the heart of every Muslim. So kind of setting the tone and also reminding us about impending warnings for the forthcoming month of Ramadan. We've had incursions by the Israeli forces into Masjid al-Aqsa. We've had arrests taking place over the last couple of Ramadans. And there's a strong sense of the fact that it's going to happen again. So that's something we need to keep aware of, and we need to continue spreading the awareness. He shared some points, action points, which I'm sure our viewers made note of. Mansour joined us from Bangladesh, obviously, and just straight to hitting the nail into the coffin. We need Al-Aqsa. Al-Aqsa doesn't need us. And I think that's a massively strong point of reflection. Gaza is ending Zionism. Gaza is ending Zionism. We need to see how we can play a role, active in continuing that ending and taking it to the next level. Zarefah's very intensive research, deep research rather, let me say it that way, is something that we all can reflect on, because it's how we tackle the Zionists we face in our spheres, whether it might be through the media, whether it might be in our circles, whether it might be through work. And let's make sure we engage them on the levels that they're meant to be engaged on, by understanding where they come from. So forget about talking to them on a level of democracy or equality or human rights, because that's not where they're coming from. It's a settler colonial mentality, and that needs to be tackled head on. And we need to ensure that we work to reclaim the narrative, because they're working on this process of permanence, that Israel is something permanent. Youmna threw shade onto journalism and the experiences she's faced, and the fact that Gaza shed light on global journalism and journalist media corporations being businesses and doing the bidding of the certain nations, certain countries, certain corporations, certain business interests, pushing a specific narrative. But honest journalists are still there. They've made the break. They've set up their own channels. They've continued to share the truth. And I think the thing that resonated, which we all can reflect on, is that it took 8 months for Gaza to allow the world to pay attention, to get the world to pay attention to what's happening in Gaza. So 8 months of casualties, of destruction, of children getting murdered, of women, men, everybody. And then only the world started taking notice. And now that the pendulum has swung, we need to ensure that we keep it going in that direction. I think Mo has had an excellent presentation, which is reflected in the comments that we've had. Proactive points and proactive advices on social media usage, on how to transform yourself, how to beat the traps of the algorithms, and how to ensure that you get your voice across. So use reputable sources from Palestine. Do not get sucked into false narratives. Expose the Zionists for who they are. Learn, be creative, use your words. Shireen's advice was excellent for mums and for dads in terms of managing the balance, if you want to call it, between parenting, between your personal time, and between your activism. And simply, I think sometimes we mollycoddle our kids too much. You decide as a parent what's age appropriate for them, but they need to see the realities of what's going on. So like she said so appropriately, let them see it and then explain it to them. So plant the seeds of activism. Both require our responsibility and attention, parenting and activism, and we can't let go of either. Dr. Azzam, I like the fact that he touched on, and we know, and our support is behind the resistance and behind Hamas in terms of resisting the occupation and what's been done in these last 15 months and beyond. But he reminded us to focus not on groups. He reminded us to focus our activism on the people of Palestine who are facing an occupation, irrespective of affiliations. And that's something that's very relevant and very, very pertinent. And to give confidence to all the activists, all those who have designs on depopulation of Gaza and depopulation of the West Bank, their leaders before them have had the same designs, the same evil designs. But those they've passed on. Gaza is still there. The West Bank is still there. Jerusalem is still there. Al-Quds is still there. So Gaza will still remain even after Trump goes. And that's something we can take a lot of confidence from. Maulana Irshaad highlighted the challenges we face in South Africa, the need to work on the youth. And one of our comments from the viewers highlighted on the fact that we do not have sufficient understanding, our youth do not have sufficient understanding of the struggles of apartheid. So that's something that we need to focus on as well, and getting that understanding across to the youth. Also to take on the challenges, although South Africa has submitted a case to the ICJ, we still have some contradictions taking place with the supply of coal, for example, and the call on cutting off coal supplies to Israel. Colombia has done that. South Africa is yet to do that. We also have South Africa not yet arresting any of these South Africans who've gone to fight on the side of Israel and actively carry out the genocide. So there's work to be done in South Africa. Nasir helped us to understand how the struggles of Kashmir and the struggles of Palestine are inextricably linked. Kashmir is under occupation by India. India and Israel share ambitions, they share goals, they share imperial designs and understanding and knowledge and friendships. So in the oppression of Kashmir and of Palestine, they share the same ideals as well. So the oppressed people would naturally stand by each other. So let's not forget, and let's understand Kashmir to understand Palestine. And just a side point of note I made, that people can go and research this as well. When Israeli soldiers, I loathe to call them soldiers, when Israeli occupation forces need to take a break from the horrors of war, they normally go and spend their time in Indian occupied Kashmir. The scenery is beautiful. It helps them get rid of, the PTSD that supposedly happens. So just understand that perspective in terms of the link between India and Israel. And Dr. Uthman spoke about the qualities, the questions people have been asking all along about what it is that gives Gazans and Palestinians the resilience that they have. And he pointed out those 4 qualities, all linked to their faith. And Mazhar Khan at the end, went straight to the jugular. Western hegemony is the threat. Western hegemony is the threat, and that's what we need to focus on, and we need to focus our energies on. And in South Africa, especially with the Muslim community, you should be leading this, because morally we have that responsibility. We boycott not because it might achieve results, we boycott because it's a moral issue. And I think that might be a point of engagement with people who are still doubtful about whether they should not be drinking Coca-Cola or not be supporting McDonald's or Starbucks. So if your morality allows you to support a company that invests in Israel, which then directly goes and kills Palestinians, then that's entirely up to you. That's entirely up to you. I would... Any closing points from yourself, Maulana Ibrahim, before we thank all our guests again for their time, and our background team as well. Our production team has been working very, very hard. Sister Mahtab in the background has been working really hard to put the show together. So, Jazakallah khair.
I think absolutely necessary to give a big shout out to that background team. There's a lot happening in the background that might not appear on screen, and to be able to juggle between the guests and the intensity of the moment for such a long period of time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of you. I think you've given also, Khalid, a very comprehensive review of all the comments, and I ditto everything that you've said there. But if I were to add anything to that, just over and above what you've said, Number one, I look at the message from Mansour, I look at the message from Moath relating to untouched audiences, that there are still untouched audiences, and in looking at where we stand right now and how to expand our activism, let us reach out to these untouched audiences, and that's the experience that I was very fortunate to have over the last few weeks going into rural Mpumalanga and getting this message of Palestine out. So there's a lot of work to do there. I also found great resonance in the point of creativity when Mansour references the resistance in Gaza and the creativity that they had on display in the prisoner exchange deal. And he said that creativity is not something that necessarily one needs to manifest in a particular arena. So if you've got those creative skills, you could use it to good effect from a very, very far distance. And this is a call out, a shout out to all the creatives in all different fields to put those creative skills and intelligence to use. Coming from the media practitioners, very strong call. Let's move away from kids' gloves approaches to language. Let's be clear to call it out. As was mentioned, Israeli society is not just a case of a few bad apples. Israeli society is steeped in the preservation of colonial privileges, whether people are on the right or whether people are on the left. To share something that was not necessarily shared by the speakers, but a valuable reminder from Yahya Sinwar, rahimahullah, where he said that if a ceasefire means that we don't get bombed, but we still don't have water, electricity, nothing, and we're still under siege, then it makes no sense, because the siege is a type of war. It just means war through another means, and that's also a crime under international law. So let's think about the resonance of that particular sentiment in the period that we find ourselves in. And then on the educational front, when we spoke about tarbiyah, I love the point of Sheikh Uthman, where he says that if you want to know if you're doing things right, then compare yourself to the people of Gaza. They've become the benchmark in our particular time. And if we are approaching life through a different prism from the prism that is the people of Gaza approaching, then we are not going to get victory. We are not going to be successful, and we are not going to be able to reap the dividends as the people of Gaza have made. And lastly, understanding this moment from a spiritual point of view. We have a statement that's attributed to, not attributed, it's definitely from Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, says that Islam in the end times, just as Islam in the earlier times had manifested itself very prominently in Makkah, in the end times Islam will manifest itself most prominently in the lands of Sham, and the best people on earth in the end times will be those who hold firmly onto the land of the migration of Ibrahim alayhi salam, which is the land of Sham. And I want to emphasize through that what a few of the speakers, I think Mansour especially, and then Mazhar at the end had pointed out, that if we are in such critical shape-shifting times for the Ummah, are we having that big game mindset that's required? And even in the strategies that are spoken about, are our strategies piecemeal strategies, looking at very localized context only and missing the bigger picture? So this moment requires people with big shoulders, people with big visions. We should live up to that. And Mazhar, to perhaps summarize what he's been trying to say, if you do things the same way you've always done, you'll get the same outcomes you've always gotten. In order to change your outcomes, you have got to do things differently.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in closing, despite there being a seize in the fire, it's a temporary, there's a lot happening in the background as well. So while we celebrate a short-term victory because of this pocket of resistance of people in Gaza that have withstood this onslaught that nowhere else in the world would have withstood for the last 15 months, this is temporary, and there are other things taking place in the background which we need to be aware of, because until Palestine is free and until the occupation ends, we still have a lot of work to do. So On that note, we'd like to thank all our viewers for joining in and for your active participation and input. A sincere thanks, Jazakallah khair, to each and every one of our speakers from different parts of the world who made themselves available at the drop of a hat, who adjusted their schedules in order to accommodate us and to be able to share a few minutes worth of expertise with you so that we could get kind of a very well-rounded perspective on the situation from Gaza to Al-Aqsa and beyond. Jazakumullah khair. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
اليوم بيحكوا لي صبر سلاحي واخر صبر الموت، والكل شايف بس لا مش فارق، صوتي حياة وانا واقف وحدي، العالم ضدي وانا مخشى، سلبوني روحي، مفتاح البيت في قلبي وانا راجع وبايدي ولدي، ولو كل العالم كان ضدي انا راجع يا بلادي راجع.